You are listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Chris, and it's time for our yearly tradition of shouting out our favorite films from the year that was. And what a year it's been. Sorry for the delay in getting this episode out, but there was just so much we want to see. And our lists pretty much kept changing up until just a few days ago. It's been amazing. In my view, 2024 has been the best year of the decade so far, and there are films I consider masterpieces I don't even have time to shout out in this episode. So they might be mentioned in our thread for it on the forum. But to get on to the episode, for those of you who haven't listened to one of these before, it's pretty straightforward. Essentially, we all go through our top 10s, counting down towards our number one favorite film of the year, but in more and more detail. First, we go through our number 10s to 6th, more or less as quickly as we can, and then, as we get to our top 5s, we all chime in and comment on each other's choices. And as for film buffs with usually pretty different tastes and perspective, there will definitely be some disagreements along for the ride. So buckle up, everyone, as Saul, Tom, Arthur, and I count down to our number one favorite films of 2024. And Arthur, since this is your first time joining one of these, I thought it would be great having you start first. And I think you have a bit of a different set of runners-up for us here today. So what are the 5 other films that you really want to shout out?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to give a shout out to stuff that wouldn't really be mentioned, or just stuff that I'm surprised is not going to make any of our lists. So basically, we might as well start at my number 6, which would be Better Man, the Robbie Williams biopic. It kind of made infamous circles, I guess you could say, because he's a monkey, a CGI monkey. But there's so much more to the film than that. It basically is, I'd kind of say it's like all that jazz, where he's kind of sincere and upfront about himself and all of his flaws. And I'm actually surprised of how vulnerable that film was. And it was very impressive. And the box office was like $2 million in North America. So hopefully you'll get his cult audience one day. I also like to give a shout out to this direct-to-video action film called One More Shot. I am trying to explore more action films, and I do think this one was one of the top tiers of the genre. It's basically one of those fake one-shot sort of films, hence the title. But the thing that made it special was that it goes for those like grandiose action scenes. And since it's one of those fake one-shot stuff, it kind of has to be really free-flowing. And when it's really dense areas, like in a hallway or something, it makes them super engaging. So that's something I'd really highly recommend. There's Anora. I'm kind of surprised that it's in none of our top 5, really. It's Sean Baker. It won a lot of Oscars. It's kind of, I guess you could say, essential. It has the usual, I guess you could say, tropes that he would have, where he takes some of the best performances out of any character. And I especially love the 3 henchmen, and hopefully they'll have their own sitcom one day. I know that's wishful thinking, but that was my favorite part of the film. For a horror honorable mention, I kind of wanted to mention Brayam Yugam. That is basically what I wished Eggers would have made this year. I preferred this film over Nosferatu, actually. It kind of went for the same black and white, super heavy contrast atmosphere and for the folklore sort of aspect. And it's pretty much done perfectly. I'm kind of sad it's not in my top 5, but I still had to give it a shout out. And for my last one would be Local Legends Bloodbath. It's a director I'm going to talk about in quite a few episodes named Matt Farley, who's a self-described outsider artist. And he does these basically zero budget films, but part 1 of this, Local Legends, is one of the few films that has over a 4 on Letterboxd, with I think over 2,000 ratings, despite being a zero-budget film. And this sequel sort of explores what happens when you become a cult figure, and how that can turn you into a monster. So on top of that, its meta-commentary, it was not as good as the first part, but I still absolutely loved it.
Definitely some very interesting choices there. I actually can't wait to see Better Man. If anything, the CGI monkey is one of the things that makes me more intrigued by this film. What about you, Tom? What's your number 10 to 6th favorite film of the year that was?
Hello everyone, so I like to add a little bit of context at the start just to say that I've seen currently 122 films from 2024 and I'll be introducing the 10 best out of that number. I imagine that Sol's probably seen a lot more than me, but I like to put a bit of context in there anyway. So to start with, my number 10 film is Oddity, a genuinely creepy and unsettling horror from Damien McCarthy, about a psychic medium who returns to the place where his sister was killed to uncover the truth about what happened there. The use of an unusual life-sized wooden mannequin as a key plot device is the stuff of nightmares, making this uncomfortable viewing for those who relish the darker side of cinema. My 9th pick is Dead Male, which is without a doubt one of the most original films of 2024, and it was wildly unpredictable throughout. Its bonkers plot involves a strange plea for help that arrives in the mail at a sorting office for undelivered letters. And this letter is linked to the mystery of a kidnapped keyboard technician, of all things. If you like films such as Sorry to Bother You and They Clone Tyrone, then this is an absolute must-see. At number 8, I have Solvent, a strange Austrian horror about a group of experts who search for Nazi documents in an old farmhouse only to discover something far more sinister within. This took me totally by surprise and is one of the most refreshing and original horrors of 2024. Fans of Session 9 would do well to seek this out, but I must warn you that Solvent will take you on an even wilder journey than Session 9. At number 7 is Love Lies Bleeding. Director Rose Glass made waves with Saint Maud, but I felt that she truly came into her own with the superb Love Lies Bleeding. It's a twisted erotic thriller about a female bodybuilder who becomes embroiled in a web of violence, and it goes to some really out there places along the way. My number 6 is shared with a mention from Arthur. I'm also tipping my hat to Anora. It is wild that such a great film does not make it to any of our top 5s, which kind of shows how strong the year is, like Chris said in the introduction. But anyway, Sean Baker here continues to hone his craft as a director who coaxes insanely good performances from his cast members in original screenplays that are utterly enthralling. I'm not surprised that Anora came away with 5 Oscars, as the exploits of a young stripper who hooks up with the son of a Russian oligarch makes for arresting viewing. It is at times both hilarious and deeply moving.
Yeah, indeed, such a fantastic year, Tom, and I think we can spoil that Anora is on none of our top 5s, but a lot of our honorable mentions. So yeah, can't believe it's not there. What about you, Saul? What's your number 10 to 5, and is Anora among them?
Hi Chris, hi everyone. No, Anora is not among my top 10 or even top 20 of the year. Maybe top 30, I'm not sure. I haven't really expanded that far, but I've definitely seen at least 20 films from the year that I prefer. I'm a bit overwhelmed by Tom's numbers there, because according to Letterboxd, I've only seen 83 films from 2024 so far. And yet already I feel in a similar position to Chris that it's been a pretty great year. And I've got a lot of films that are 8 out of 10 for me or above, just out of these 83 films that I've seen. So going through my numbers 10 through to number 6. For my number 10 of the year, I have September 5, which looks at a sports news crew attempting to cover the Munich terrorist attacks that are unfolding only meters away from their building. In the current confusing and mixed up times in which terrorists are treated as folk heroes and the taking of civilian hostages is considered to be a noble and worthy act, it was refreshing to come across a film that was prepared to focus on the innocent victims of a terror act as opposed to the political motives involved. And I find it kind of sad that the film has copped much flack for being politically neutral. For my number 9, I have Conclave, which I wrote down as being the best picture winner that we should have had, and I stand by that. I massively prefer Conclave to Anora, and I know there was a gigantic Anora campaign, but I think Conclave is the best picture winner that we deserved and should have had. Yes, the plot doesn't sound like much because it's about the election of a new pope in the Vatican, but it plays out as more of a thriller than a drama. with the clergy members sabotaging and trying to sway one another, bickering like little kids despite being heads of a religious order. In a climate in which the Catholic Church is only really negatively associated with one thing, the insight into other bad behaviour behind closed doors was fascinating. And shot without any artificial lighting, the Vatican has never looked spookier. In 8th spot, I have Rumours, the latest film from Guy Maddin, which has been cited as his most accessible film to date. That might be true, but the film is still plentifully weird and unusual, involving a small group of international political leaders who inexplicably find themselves suddenly cut off from the rest of the world amid an unnamed global catastrophe. As with Conclave, this is a film where influential leaders become reduced to squabbling big kids, as none of the leaders are sure about how to cope without underlings to support them, while a horror angle late in the piece adds lots of dark laughs. In 7th spot, I have Baby Invasion, the latest film from Harmony Korine. This film appears higher up in somebody else's list, so I won't discuss it more now, except to say that it's nightmare-infused cinema in the best possible way. In 6th spot, I have Solomon's Story, which again appears higher up on someone else's list. In fact, it appears higher up on 2 other people's lists. So we'll definitely get to that one later on. A really great, stressful, anxiety-filled drama that I can't wait to discuss later on in the episode.
Yeah, our mutual love for Solomon's Story is one of the big and surprising stories of this podcast. Can't wait to get into that one either. So for me, like I said, so many great films hit the cutting room floor here when I just had to restrain myself to 10 films. But on my number 10 is the first part of Dag Johan Haugerud's Sex, Dreams, Love trilogy, appropriately named Sex, though there's no actual sex scenes in it. Instead, it's an incredibly raw and vulnerable exploration of all of the themes mentioned in the trilogy's name, as well as identity, all through dialogue and some quite unique visual choices. I just can't wait to see the next 2 installments here, especially as the next film, Dreams, won the Golden Bear at the Berlinale this year. So really high hopes for where this trilogy will go. On my number 9 spot is another film very much carried through dialogue and active examination of characters and their relationships. It's Jesse Eisenberg's A Real Pain. I feel that took me completely by surprise, as it's just not my type of film usually. It's not overly flashy. It's not really visually beautiful or drawing attention to itself in that way, which is what I tend to go for. Instead, it just really immerses us in these characters and its journey. I was particularly impressed in how it essentially lets us go on this Jewish heritage tour in Poland with our characters, experiencing it with them, and experiences their connections and their familiar traumas all along the journey. Beautifully acted, wonderfully crafted roles is just absolutely phenomenal. And my 8th favorite actually has even more connection to this. It is also dialogue driven and even more raw and heartbreaking in its exploration of depression, anger and loneliness. It's Mike Leigh's Hard Truths, another film with just phenomenal performances. It's hard to watch at times. Some darkly comedic elements there too. I was laughing at points, but then it just got almost too much to bear. In fact, I might say that this is a contender for Mike Leigh's best film to date, which is quite high praise for a director who's been around for over 50 years and is now in his 80s. I just can't believe he made this film now. And in 7th place is one of the year's more controversial films, at least in its own country of sorts. It's Mohammed Rasoulov's paranoia-driven The Seed of the Sacred Fig, which can almost feel like a parable or fable, but it's grounded in the real world. It has gotten such uncomfortable directions here, as the family unit turned on itself. You observe the clashes of loyalties and the way that the regime rears its head, even in the most intimate of places. Essentially symbolized through the father and how the family responds to him as something goes wrong. It's an incredibly powerful but also unnerving viewing. And in sixth place, once again, it's Anora on 3 of our top 10s. Yeah, I mean, when I saw this, I thought this could even be a contender for my number 1, or I was certain it would be in my top 5. That's how strong the year has been. It's just explosive, it's visceral, it's shockingly funny. It's one of Baker's very, very, very best, and it really managed to just flip between cold, raw, and just laugh out loud madness without skipping a beat. Like the character performances are so nuanced. It really just grips you in every way, and I love the cinema that Sean Baker is able to bring to life here. It's like, just more of this, please. And that's my 5 runner-ups, which brings us to the real meat of the episode. And we can start with you again, then, Arthur. What's your 5th favorite film of 2024?
So my number 5 will actually be a documentary, which is kind of rare on my end, unless it's something like Frederick Wiseman. That would be a soundtrack to a coup d'etat. I'll try to ignore the more political aspects of this, just in case there might be an argument. But it is kind of a must for a film like this, considering that it is a political documentary. So basically, it shows an important lesson of whenever something from the global south, like a country that aims more for self-sufficiency, I guess you can say, and what happens when there are outsider forces going into it. And with a film like this, I also appreciated that they had more nuance into the era, which was during the Cold War. But then we have to talk about the filmmaking perspective of this, because I actually think with Tom, there was an episode where he hated documentaries. So maybe this might be a convincing factor. It's basically an Adam Curtis film on crack. That's the best way to describe it. It's around 2.5 hours long, but it never feels slow just because of how the editing is. It's actually kind of overwhelming at times. It goes super fast and super in-depth, mostly by text on the screen just popping up everywhere. And there are only a handful of interviews, but they're kind of paced in a way that they give room to breathe, but not to like completely kill the pacing of it. I guess the best description of it is just being really hyper and going through Wikipedia rabbit holes, learning as much as possible, but this is made in a way that is more pleasurable for your senses.
I think what I absolutely love about the soundtrack to Coup d'etat is just the fact that it essentially feels like a political thriller. Like the intro is essentially 20 or so minutes long, and it sets up all of the players on the scene, from the AI director to Khrushchev, and it's all just done as if they were characters in this large espionage thriller, where you get some quotes from them, you're seeing them talk. And it's like played up in like how they hate each other, how little they think of each other, what their views are on that topic, and it's all scored to gas. And in the middle of this, you also somehow get all of these gas musicians interlinked. And it balances so many things because it has this poppy, I would say really accessible, mainstream pop flow. Like I said, it is a thriller, it's fast-paced, it's bouncing around, but at the same time it manages to combine it with like this essay's thesis of sort of how jazz tied in with the coup against Lumumba, and seeing those things play out, seeing the actors, seeing Belgium, all of the double dealings, following the steps along and seeing how jazz actually genuinely played a role as they were ambassadors for the US, and they were able to do sneaky things, genuinely sneaky things, from beginning to end through jazz. Like there's so many things part of history that I was completely unaware of, even though I've followed quite a bit of this situation before. It's obviously one of the most famous coups in history, and it managed to just present it in such a fun, aggravating package. It pretty much has everything. It's a little bit long, maybe, for some audiences in particular. It's about 2.5 hours long, but it doesn't really feel it. And yeah, just a really great ride with some really powerful themes and knowledge and subject matter.
Yeah, I totally agree with the thriller aspect. That's kind of what made it fun. Like, when Khrushchev visited America and just like, oh, I read all of your files and stuff like that. And they were kind of playing off each other in a way with how it was edited. And I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Like the part where, like, hey, we get the same information. We should just same information from the same people. Maybe we should just pay once and we share it. You know, it's like it really manages to play up the characters against each other and form a genuine, cohesive narrative. And that's one of the things that you rarely get in a documentary of this kind. So just really exciting to see and really impressive.
Arthur was spot on. I don't really like documentaries, and also jazz and politics, documentary, the combination of those three things, it's not my cup of tea. So sadly, I haven't seen this one. I know this makes me sound like I'm ignorant, but yeah, this just doesn't sound like a film for me.
I was actually interested in checking out soundtrack to Coup d'etat until I realised it was 2.5 hours long. And I'm sort of like, this is a bit long for a subject that I don't know if I'm interested in. The Adam Curtis comparison, unfortunately, is a negative for me, but it's still a film that you guys have described really nicely, which I am interested in checking out when I feel in the mood for a 2.5 hour documentary.
Glad you managed to do that, and I can mention it is on my top 20 as well. What about you, Tom? What's your fifth favorite film of the year that was?
Well, Chris, my fifth favourite film is also on other people's lists, higher up as well, I believe. So I'll just keep quiet for now and speak up when we get to that point.
Ooh, a little
Keep
bit.
the suspense building.
Yeah, it's a little bit of suspense. I like it. What about you then, Sol? What's your fifth favorite film of the year?
My fifth favourite film of the year was a bit of a surprise to me, but it might have not been to people who know me, because anybody who knows me well knows that I'm a big David Cronenberg fan. However, his second latest film, Crimes of the Future, didn't really do it for me. I thought it was good. I didn't think it was anything special. I absolutely love Maps to the Stars, and seeing Crimes of the Future afterwards, I thought, well, maybe Cronenberg doesn't quite have it in him anymore. His latest film, The Shrouds, though, is absolutely magnificent. It's by far his most personal film to date. It's born from his own grief over the death of his wife due to illness. And what's interesting about it is that many of Cronenberg's films have revolved around tumours at abnormal growths to visceral body horror ends. The same ideas apply here also, but the focus is not on horror practical effects, but rather the crippling effect of having a cancer that appears to be inventive or creative, to use language that Cronenberg has used elsewhere. The idea also here is that the cancer is found to be developing on a decomposing body, and it could be because the body's been wrapped in this shroud, because the protagonist runs a graveyard that allows you to see 3D images of decomposing corpses. It's a very morbid idea, but we all grieve in our own ways, which is, I think, what is Cronenberg's key point in the film. It opens with a striking scene in which the protagonist is told that his teeth are rotting as a reaction to his grief. Could this be possible? Is it what Cronenberg is imagining is happening to him since his wife passed on? It's absolutely no mistake that Vincent Cassel in the lead role has been made up to look like a dead ringer from Cronenberg. Making this even more like a Cronenberg film is a perfectly moody Howard Shore composition. Another key element, which is very Cronenbergish, is the fascination with technology. That's very rife here, from the shrouds themselves to an AI personal assistant to even Vincent Cassel's Tesla car, which might seem like product placement, but it's a bit subversive, because Cronenberg actually pushes for caution and skepticism with evolving technology. There was a little bit of body obsession in there, which I felt didn't quite work, where the character's talking a lot about how much he loves his wife's body rather than his personality. But in general, for me, it was just an amazing look at grief, and it was extremely Cronenbergish, even though you don't have all the body horror and bubbling tumors and everything that we're used to seeing in a Cronenberg film.
Yeah, your tech comment kind of reminded me of how people actually grieve over death and how technology could go into that. Because the thing we're terrified the most when someone, like even a pet, dies is how does the person sound like? What are their mannerisms? And you slowly start forgetting these things and you begin to panic. And then that's when I think other types of technology slowly started kicking in. Like you have portraits back then in medieval times or 100 years after. So you always remember how that person looks like in detail. Then you had the actual photographs and the videos, and it kept going on. And I saw great tech like being an exaggeration of that because he would see the body itself and that way would never actually forget anything. And because considering the plot setup, there was all the vandalism and like the other growth things going on that he started having that sort of panic. So it kind of still showed that aspect that no matter what, you'll still kind of forget stuff over time. And kind of the thing to do is to get over the fear of that. And on top of that, I obviously shouldn't spoil it, so I won't go too in depth. But in general, like you said, with the Tesla and the other aspects, it kind of just shows how dependent we are on technology at the same time. So the fact that he covered it with grief and then on top of like AI and Tesla and all these sorts of other technology, I thought he did a brilliant job with that.
I went into this film with a bit of hesitation just based on its low rating, though unlike Soul, I actually thought Crimes Against the Future was pretty good to great as well. It wasn't as big a shock for me when I ended up feeling similarly about this one. I agree with Soul that you can feel how personal this film is to Cronenberg. And those of us who know what Cronenberg looks like, I mean, maybe a lot of people have never seen pictures of him or aren't familiar with him. Yes, I mean, Vince Gilligan is really a dead ringer for him here. And I think, the news about his wife's passing, etc., it infuses it with so much extra subtext. I think the film does a lot of really interesting things at the same time. It has this lamentation of that. It has this really unique concept, this futurism, that really gets us hooked. But then it also has this thriller aspect to it, which of course Cronenberg loves to do. It has this paranoia element. What's going on? What's reality? And it's pretty effective. I do get why some people are detractors here, because it could feel to a lot of people that like it goes nowhere, perhaps, that there's a lot of smoke and mirrors with a weak resolution. And I was a little bit puzzled by the ending myself, but it's a great ride. And I think that real fans of Cronenberg, especially those who have enjoyed his last films over the last 2 decades, will most likely find something to love here too. So I think that the very low rating here, like it's below 6. I think it's like 5.4 or something on IMDb. I think that any real Cronenberg fan should take that with a grain of salt.
I love the concept of the shrouds, this idea of grave tech, and I agree with Chris, it almost feels like a cyber thriller at times, but I wish it would have lent fuller into the horror aspects visually, instead of it being more kind of subtle and psychological. I find Cronenberg's at his best when his horrors are more visceral and raw. There were times when some of the performances felt a little stagey and amateurish to me at times, and sadly I do feel like Cronenberg is past his best work, but it's definitely a step up from Crimes of the Future, and I'll still be there for his next film, just in case those occasional flashes of brilliance that still come through become more than just flashes. For instance, the opening nightmare scene, that was very arresting, and I wish we'd have had more moments like that throughout.
Yeah, it was kind of funny with me when we were talking about the Evolving Taste episode. Before, I loved Cronenberg for his body horror stuff, but now it's like purely the psychological aspects. So that's probably why I clicked with this one so well.
It's an interesting and understandable reaction there, Tom, especially because I think Videodrome and The Fly are Cronenberg's 2 best films, and they're definitely very visceral, very strong body horror elements. But then my third favourite Cronenberg film is A History of Violence, and I do think that's one of the 100 best films ever made. And I guess for me, even though body horror is going to what I'm first and foremost and we're going to love about Cronenberg, it is the psychological stuff also. And The Fly and Videodrome, even though they've got amazing practical effects, for me, they're both character studies, primarily, first and foremost, people who are losing their minds, pretty much. And I guess I sort of see similar things like that in A History of Violence with Mental Headspace, or as Arthur said, the psychology. And I'd say the same in The Shrouds to a degree, but I do understand that reaction as a horror fan going and watching The Shrouds. It's interesting that Chris mentioned the resolution because I thought it was quite weak myself. And then I read somebody's review on Letterboxd, and I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to mention there. But they actually said something quite poetic about it, and then actually it makes more sense from a poetic point of view rather than from a narrative point of view. As a narrative, it feels like, is that the ending? But if we look at it more in a metaphorical sense, it actually is a really cool way, I think, of ending the film. And probably just the last point I'll raise before we move on is, yes, the film does have a 5 point whatever on IMDb, but who cares about IMDb these days? It did have a 2.9 on Letterboxd when I first logged it, but since then it's gone up to a 3.1 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So on the main go-to movie site these days for film fans, the reputation is slowly increasing, and I do see that in future it will be regarded as one of Cronenberg's better films. It might not at the moment because horror fans are going into it and going, wait, this isn't traditional Cronenberg horror. And Crimes of the Future is more traditional Cronenberg. But I think just the wealth of ideas, the complexity of them, the Vincent Cassel performance, I just think everything adds up. It's such a personal project. It's one that I could see climbing up to being a top 10 Cronenberg film for me after a couple of rewatches. And I'm really just happy that all of you, even though Tom wasn't absolutely enthusiastic about it, all three of you were quite positive on the film. That's very assuring.
Yeah, I just want to add that I do actually really love A History of Violence and Eastern Promises. I'm not only a fan of Cronenberg's horror stuff, but The Shrouds just felt like a big step down from all of those films. It's okay. It was a reasonably well-made film, but it just feels like it doesn't have the spark that he had during a lot of his earlier career.
And yeah, I can add that Cosmopolis is actually my favorite Cronenberg. And I won't be able to talk too much now because I'll follow Tom's train of thought here and not reveal my number 5 as it's higher on someone else's list. So let's keep the secrecy going and spin back to Arthur. What's your number 4 of the year, Arthur?
It's kind of unfortunate because this is kind of the antithesis of one of the films that we're going to talk about later on, which hopefully won't spoil it, but we'll see. My number 4 choice is A Different Man. It's basically another film made this year about body dysmorphia, and I find that it goes for a completely different approach than The Substance and kind of does a clever job of it. It's basically much more cruel, but much more positive at the same time, which made it really amusing. It basically shows that the overall charming demeanor and personality is a lot more important than your looks, and it does so in a clever way by having Adam Pearson's disability also being shown in another character who later on removes it. And that's probably the highlight of the film. It's Adam Pearson and Sebastian Stan. They both absolutely kill it, especially Sebastian. So when he has that physical disability on him, he acts a lot more meek, but he's a lot more honest. And I was fairly impressed seeing that. And then you kind of have the antithesis of that, where he acts super cocky after he gets a surgery to get it removed. But then Adam Pearson's character comes in, and because his life is just so much better because he's a much better person, that's when Sebastian really shines because it shows his slow descent into madness. My favorite part is how pretty much most of the second half of his performance is just sort of staring at the camera or staring at Adam Pearson in the distance. And he doesn't really do anything, but he just speaks 1,000 words with those types of stares. It can range from being funny to just being kind of depressed. I guess you could say it's kind of like a Kubrick film in a way. And I am kind of really surprised and glad that he won a Golden Globe for that. And he also did The Apprentice last year, so I'm really impressed by his performances because both of those are completely different styles, but he killed both of them. Although I'd say this one is the better one of the two.
I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum there. I preferred him in The Apprentice. I thought that's the role where he just really, really impressed me. I think he's really strong here too. But he really became Trump in that film. It was just amazing to see him go there. I really liked A Different Man, but I didn't quite love it. I think that the part that wins me over completely is when Adam Pearson is on screen and you get this semi-love triangle, this identity crisis of Sebastian Stan. But what I didn't really like that much about it is that this section comes so late in the movie. I could be wrong, but it's like 40-50 minutes in that Adam Pearson is introduced. And the build-up there is quite slow. It doesn't Sebastian Stan does a very good job setting it all up, but it's not as thrilling or exciting as when Pearson joins in. And I feel like they could have cut down and reprioritized some things. And without spoiling the ending, I also thought it went a bit too fast. I think that can work really well for some people. There's the efficiency of it, and it almost evolves into a semi-surreal, like Kaufman-esque direction there towards the end, which almost felt a little bit unprompted based on the tone before. But I can also see lots of people loving it. I guess you loved it. So I'm a little bit more ambivalent on it, but I think it's a really, really good film. And I think pretty much everyone should seek this out. It's one of the top movies of the year for a reason.
Thinking about what you're saying, seeing how he is in the beginning is kind of how Adam Pearson was when he got introduced. So I felt it was kind of a cool dynamic that he basically acted the same until he got that surgery. And then that's when his personality kind of got ruined.
I was very intrigued by the idea of A Different Man. It was a film I was looking forward to, and on paper it sounded like something I would love, but for some reason I just really struggled to connect with the main character's journey, and I felt like it was lacking the impact that would elevate it to greatness. There's undoubtedly some solid performances in the film, and it remains intriguing throughout, but it just didn't resonate with me enough to really leave a mark on me. But it's good to hear your opinions on it, and I think that, people are finding a lot to enjoy in A Different Man, so I would still say it's worth seeking out, even if my response is a little muted compared to everyone else's.
I'm actually a bit surprised that Chris and Tom were more into the film, because I did think A Different Man was absolutely fantastic. It might even be my 11th or 12th favourite film of the year. I've got a lot of affinity with Arthur this year with his choices. I guess for me, I saw A Different Man as being very similar to a modern version of The Face of Another, the classic Hiroshi Shigehara film. It's got the same sort of idea there about getting newfound confidence just from having a new face, even though you're essentially still the same person underneath. And I did think it was really interesting when Adam Pearson came into the screen, and then all of the envy and jealousy and sort of, I guess it's a bit of like ironic, and all the emotions that sort of end up coming up in Sebastian Stan's character. But for me, it was sort of interesting because Chris said it felt a bit late that Adam Pearson came in. Even though I thought the entire film was excellent, for me, where the film was really top tier was during the first half before Adam Pearson even entered the screen, because you've got this experimental process that Sebastian Stan is trying in order to be able to help with his facial condition, and it's all this fear associated and the dread there and the possible side effects. So the first half of the film for me was really dread based. You really feel about how awful he feels and how victimized he feels inside of his body, and how in his body dysmorphia, you sort of really feel for that, and really feel for that dread about changing it, that initial confidence surge that comes out. I really felt invested in the character, and I guess just when the Adam Pearson stuff happens, even though Adam Pearson is absolutely fantastic in the film, I guess for me that section of the film dragged a bit more compared to the build-up for it. But like I said, it's maybe 11 or 12 for me in the year. I think it's an absolutely fantastic film. And it's one of those films that I think is going to get really reevaluated more and more as time goes on, because all the body dysmorphia stuff, it's very relevant, I think, to society these days.
Yeah, very true, and we're gonna touch on that topic. Much later actually, but there's another film on this topic that we're certain we're gonna come to in by the time we get to our number ones. So, Tom, you're up next. What's your fourth favorite film of the year?
My fourth favourite film of the year is Bird. Now, Andrea Arnold's first feature film since the mesmerising American Honey is a poignant coming-of-age drama with a hint of magical realism. It follows the exploits of Bailey, a 12-year-old girl who connects with a young man, Bug, who is seeking his estranged father, and she also becomes embroiled in the antics of her older brother and a violent gang that he mixes with. Just like in American Honey, the soundtrack brings a lot to the film, with stirring indie and Britpop anthems enhancing the storytelling, particularly as Bailey's largely absent father parties with his friends in the squat where the dysfunctional family reside. There are many elements of a kitchen sink drama here, with subplots that would feel right at home in the films of Mike Leigh and Ken Loach, but the magical realism brings an interesting touch to the proceedings. It's through these scenes that we see the childlike perception of the young protagonist, who retreats into a world of fantasy when things start to get tough and nasty, which they do on several occasions. Nakia Adams is excellent in the lead role as Bailey, and the support from Franz Rogowski as the unusual character and Barry Keoghan as Bailey's chaotic but loving father make this a real joy to watch. There's a superb, heart-wrenching scene towards the end of the film that I really loved, where Keoghan takes centre stage to perform Blur's The Universal on karaoke, a song that I didn't think I really liked until it all came together in this bizarrely off-key moment that I suppose you could say it comes close to rivaling his dalliances with Murder on the Dance Floor in Saltburn. I mean, at its heart, this is a hard-hitting and touching film, but there are moments of joy along the way, and it makes for a truly memorable experience that showcases Arnold's vibrant creativity when depicting characters with troublesome backgrounds. And I would say that anyone who enjoyed American Honey will surely find a lot to love here.
Yeah, I love Bird, and I think it's even better than American Honey. I think this film essentially took all of the more visceral kitchen sink aesthetics of Andrea Arnold that she's been building throughout her career. You can feel the same kind of visceral cinema as you felt in American Honey, the kind of perspective of this teenage girl in a very, very rough world. I mean, this is what Andrea Arnold has pretty much been doing forever now. She knows how this works. She tends to focus in on people from toxic homes, broken families, poverty, and find, I suppose, moments of beauty and connections in it, at least to a point. And here, she manages to kind of, I'm not sure if elevated is the right way, but she brings in this magical realism that could feel really out of place, and some people might almost take issue with, but it just transforms what we're seeing. And yes, like you have this mystery around Bird, and Franz Rogowski is actually been talked about so many times in this podcast because he's just in so many amazing films. His performance through his body, very often not that verbal. It's amazing. It also just have all of these scenes where it's kind of just standing on top of buildings like a bird, and our protagonist is looking up at him. It really sets the tone. Though I will completely agree with you, Tom, that part of the movie is Barry Keoghan as Bailey's father, Bug. He had his first child when he was 14. He's a drug dealer. He's like this tattooed up thug who's been a pretty terrible dad, and at the same time you can actually feel a strong sense of love there, especially towards the end, and there's so many heartfelt moments that you wouldn't expect coming out of this dark place. It feels magical, and it's my number 11th of the year at the moment. I would have loved to include it in my top 10, but I'm so happy you mentioned it there. So yeah, fantastic film.
It's really interesting hearing you, Chris, and Tom go on about the film. You said some really enthusiastic things about it, which kind of makes me feel like I saw a different film entirely. I just love like the comments and how eloquent you guys are about the film, but look, Bird really didn't do very much for me. In regards to Tom's comment about if you liked American Honey, you'll probably like this. Well, I liked American Honey. I'd say it's probably her best film so far. I wasn't really into Fish Tank, and I don't know if I even like this one as much as Fish Tank. What Chris said about the magic realism not feeling out of place, to me that did feel out of place. But I guess just the worst thing for me is that I just found the characters obnoxious, like not very likable at all. The dad, played by Barry Keoghan, does have some moments of redemption towards the end where he actually ends up being a bit more of a better father without spoiling too much, but I didn't like him at all. I found the main girl very moody and sullen and interesting to follow around. And for me, the only character I really liked there was the title Drifter, played by Franz Rogowski, but it's just a glorified supporting role with the what I described as being the outer blue fantasy elements or the magic realism. That didn't really work for me, but it was sort of the only character that I liked. I just found it a very miserable world, and I didn't find any characters to latch on to or like or even find intriguing to follow around in this world. Something else which I also feel that I should mention, and I don't know if I should, but for me, it was an incredible distraction. Maybe that's why I wasn't able to cotton on to the film. But the lead actress, I can't find out how old she is. There isn't information going out there. She's meant to be 12. She looks around 18. Barry Keoghan looks very young for his age. He's apparently 32, or he was when the film was made. He looks about 25. So it looks like there's about 7 years age difference between them. And I'm not sure if the casting by Andrea Arnold was on purpose to try and show how they're not really that much more mature than each other, but for me it was a total distraction. I'm trying to work out how could he have fathered a kid at 7 or 8 years old. And I know that shouldn't be my main takeaway from the film, but I guess because the fantasy parts weren't working for me and I found the characters obnoxious, all that I could focus on was this, what to me seemed to be ridiculous casting. I mean, I teach 12-year-old girls. I know what most of them look like. The actress in there, she might have been 12, but she looked a lot older than her age, and Barry Keoghan's always looked quite young, and for me just the age difference was incredibly distracting in a film that unfortunately I wasn't enjoying in the first place. But hopefully Arthur can say some nice and redeeming things about it at least.
Yeah, I actually might defend the casting part, at least age-wise, because if you think about a lot of that kitchen sink realism, or even just in low-class places and worldwide, most of the time the parents usually have their kids when they're very young, so I think that kind of emphasizes that point. I'm not too big on this film either because of the magic realism, but I really enjoyed the fleeting moments showing nature, especially when the aspect ratio changes to the cell phone type, or the fleeting moments with the seagulls and other animals. But I do have one weird nitpick, and that's with Bug. He's obviously a lower class person, but coming from a guy who even has face tattoos, his tattoos are clearly well too done, and I'm sure were very expensive, so I don't think he would have been able to afford those tattoos.
Maybe that's where all the drug money went.
Maybe you're right, Chris. I'm glad that Arthur picked up on the moments of nature, because they were also some of the highlights in American Honey. It seems like Arnold has a way of finding these moments of beauty, aside from the chaos that all of her characters create. And I suppose reacting to Sol's comments, I'd agree that some of the characters are obnoxious, but I would say that that's realistic. There are lots of people like that in the UK, sadly. There's lots of nice people as well. You get people like that everywhere, don't you? But Andrea Arnold grew up in Kent. She grew up on a council estate. Her parents were very young when they had her, and they separated at a young age. So I think a lot of this is instilled from part of her experiences growing up. And I would say that the age difference didn't even come into question in my mind. It seemed perfectly reasonable, the relationship between these two people. So I don't know, maybe you saw something different, like you said, Sol, but yeah, I was into the film. I had no concerns about the age difference. I thought it was great casting and everything worked perfectly, which is why it's my fourth favourite film of the year, I suppose.
And what about you, Sol? What's your fourth favorite film of the year?
At the moment, we seem to be in a really, really strong place for animated films coming out of Europe without any dialogue. Probably my second favourite film of 2023 was Robot Dreams, and I'm really disappointed that I actually saw it after we recorded the Best of 2023 podcast, because otherwise I would have highlighted the film there. However, I get to highlight Robot Dreams in this podcast because my number 4 of the year is another European film without any dialogue. And in case you haven't guessed already, it is the Latvian film Flow. I'm not going to try and mangle the title in Latvian, but it's the recent film that incredibly beat The Wild Robot to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature Film. But I saw it before it won the Oscar, and I was a little bit hesitant about it because I've seen Away, the previous film that the director made, which was again without dialogue, and the story for me didn't quite support such a long film without dialogue. But I think it's just because this time we're sort of centered on animals and the animals communicating. It actually makes sense not to have the dialogue in there, and just so much gets conveyed anyway. For people who don't know, it's about this cat's struggle to survive when its local environment is unexpectedly flooded. There's always imminent danger there from the flooding, as well as from the animals the cat encounters along the way, because not all of them are friendly at first. I found the story to be generally unpredictable, while the character bonding is definitely foreseeable. And the way they manage to understand each other is quite charming, but it's very foreseeable they'll eventually get along. But what was harder to predict for me is where the story was going to head and what would happen to the characters after each situation and how the flood situation would get resolved, if at all. For me, probably the weakest point of the film is the animation itself. It's great. We've got this open source animation. You're able to create great feature films like this. But even though the backgrounds look amazing, the texture of the animals is very blocky, especially in close-up. I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as Madagascar, but that's sort of what it came to mind. And then the cat sort of looks like it changes colour from different angles. But I don't want to go on about the negatives, because for the most part, this was a really easy recommendation for me. It's just got a very thought-provoking plot about like how unprepared animals would be for climate change, as well as other different species, and whether they're capable of banding together in adversity. And there's no explicit messaging because there is no dialogue. There's nothing that's communicated out loud, but it's tense and it's stressful at times. It's funny and adorable at other times, and it's simply exquisite to watch other times as these animals navigate an eerily empty landscape full of human landmarks, but without a single human being in sight.
I would say that Flow was a cute but ultimately forgettable film. I never really bought into the peril, and at times it felt like I was just watching someone play a video game, kind of like another film we will discuss later on. You know, I'm sat down, I want to watch a film. I don't want to be feeling like a video game. I suppose part of that was due to the animation style also. It was a pleasant and harmless diversion, but nothing more. I doubt I'd return to it, and I'm kind of surprised that it's doing so well on the awards circuit, really. But if you've got a thing for films about cute cats, maybe you'll get more out of it than I did.
It didn't make my best of list, but it's still something I highly recommend. I actually did enjoy the animation style of the animals, and I find that it kind of had this stylized approach to it that I really enjoyed. And it would be inspiring for others because it was made by Blender, which, with Tom's comment, is mostly used to make video games. So that would summarize it well. My beef with it, though, is that there's not really any room to breathe with the movie. Like, it goes full on for anxiety and just these more loud moments. And it kind of got overwhelming because of that. I know it's kind of weird to say because of another film I have on my list, but I hope I'll have a good comparison between the two. Although I should mention, my favorite part is not necessarily the animation, but rather the camera itself. The way it was, I know it sounds like a pun, but like free-flowing towards the scenes. Just going throughout the various areas and focusing on every character as it goes on. You rarely see camera styles like that in animated films, so I was quite impressed by that.
So I was actually expecting to not like Flow as much as I did, because I had seen the stills and I'm not a big fan of the animation style here. But I did see that it was a big step up from Gins to Barudis' first film, Away, and you can really see the progression here. The first film really felt like a beta game. The animations are just so poor and weak. Here, they're significantly more refined, and he's really able to manage to capture beauty and more so like the movements of the animals. I think one of the things that people really, really love about Flow is the fact that the characters are, well, animals, but they feel like the animals. They're voiced by real animals as well. And their body language and the way they act and behave throughout is really, really believable. Like, this is how these animals move. And also just the unspoken connections between them, the way that the film manages to tell its story through these relationships. That's very elegantly done. It's very clever. This would have been a great film for me if the animation had just gone one or two steps further and removed the what Tom referred to as the video game aesthetic, because that is really the main pushback I have against it. It just, if Away was like early beta, like this is like the one that, like this is like the first trial before the finishing touches are placed for me. So I just wish there was a bit more budget to just refine this a little bit more. I also thought that the ending was a little bit odd, but I don't want to get too into that. I mean, it's a pretty unique concept. This water, the water gets higher in the world gets flooded, and these animals have to find a way to survive. And it's really visceral in that sense. It's just constant action and progression. That really works. It's a really entertaining ride. I would highly recommend it. Again, the only real downside for me here is the animation.
A few things to respond to there, but I might just go to Chris's point about the world getting more and more flooded, because one of the most interesting things for me, I thought, was the lack of human characters there. And I thought, well, the human characters have caused this flooding. It's possibly due to climate change and all the things that humans have done, and they're sort of like absconded, and all the animals have to survive all the terrible things we've done to the planet. I thought that was an interesting angle. With the video game aesthetic, which Tom mentioned and Chris mentioned also, yeah, look, the person I saw the film with, he said the exact same thing afterwards. He said it looks like too many video games or video game simulators that he's played, and he just could not immerse himself in the story at all. Very luckily for me, it worked. I think it also worked because I have a cat, and it looks a lot like the Flow cat. And Tom's just shown me his cat looks nothing like the Flow cat. So maybe that's why it worked a little bit less for him. But for whatever case, it worked well for me. But I think also to Arthur's point about the overwhelming anxiety, I think that's also part of why it worked for me. Because people who know me well know that I like anxiety-filled films. I like films that are full of dread and uncertainty. And this one, I guess, really just hit that sweet spot for me.
And it clearly hit the sweet spot for a lot of other people as well, given its awards and all of the buzz around it. So don't be put off by us. And I'm actually going to skip my turn again, because once again, believe it or not, my number 4 is higher on someone else's list. So looking forward to revealing what that movie is as well. But that brings us back to you, Arthur. What's your third favorite film of the year?
It might be what I thought before was going to be one of the most controversial choices, but it actually seemed to be received decently well here. Although, with Letterboxd, if you look at the graph, it's just absolute chaos, which I expected from a guy like him. It's Baby Invasion by Harmony Korine. I thought this was going to be a very immature thing because it's deep faking baby faces onto home invading criminals, and like Corinne's new company is called Edgelord, but I would call this one of the best formal experimental works that I've seen so far this decade. And as a good summary, it was actually not by me, but by someone at Rachel Music, and they compared it to Andy Warhol and Robert Rauschenberg just for Zoomer culture, and that's just the most apt way of explaining it. So the thing I enjoyed the most about it is that there was a sort of contrast of like how the video game is for the player versus how it is for the outsider. So of course the home invasion is the game itself, and there's just a huge laundry list of all the things that are going on to make like an overstimuli, to basically make an overstimuli for the gamer himself. And the contrast lies in how little actually happens in the film. It's very repetitive with the home invasions. They just mess around for most of the time, and there's so much downtime. They hardly even do anything that's basically thrilling in a home invasion. It just looks repetitive and boring to an outsider, I guess you can say, as a summary. But for the gamer itself, that's when it's exciting. So there's two scenes that I think show this the best. There are two segments where there's basically this tunnel that like a first person point of view walks through. And in the tunnel, each square is the same game footage that's showing up. And in the end of the tunnel, you see the player playing the game. It's like the most headache-inducing thing possible. And it kind of shows just how overwhelming it is for the gamer themselves. But then when you see the actual game itself, like when they show through a phone or basically just in other places, it's basically the most boring thing. It's just mannequins falling down and standing up as someone shooting them. So I kind of felt like this showed how it is for someone just watching the monitor versus someone that's actually looking at it through a game. And this kind of showed that Zoomer culture perfectly. And I don't want to spoil one thing, but one of the films here I felt is too much of a product of its time. And it is kind of in this case too, but in this case, I could see this aging a lot better, and I actually think it's going to be remembered for the decades to come.
I wasn't quite sure how I'd react to Baby Invasion because Harmony Corinne's pretty hit and miss for me, with more misses than hits. But this one really worked for me, I guess, because it's largely a screen life film. So like Unfriended or Searching or Spree, it's one of those films where everything that we're seeing is happening on somebody's laptop screen. And we get the sort of things that would you be seeing with that. So we get pop-up ads coming every so often. We're getting low battery warnings. But we're also getting, when they're involved in the game, there's this comment wall on the left-hand side of the screen. And the comment wall was a bit distracting at first, but the more it came up, the more I actually liked it, because it sort of allows you to choose where to focus your attention. So it's like a split-screen film where you can, like, focus on one split or the other split, and I just feels to me it's going to be an incredibly rewatchable film. And just every so often I would pause the film. I know Tom's not going to like that because he's the film purist, but I'd pause it and just take a screenshot and just look at what some of the comments were, and some of the comments that people are making just incredibly interesting. I didn't know whether to laugh, cringe, or cry at the comments. Like somebody was saying, this is peak humanity as a reaction to what the baby invaders were doing. And a lot of people just using like Sigma and all these other terms, which young people use. And just the reactions to remind me a lot of Spree, which, in case people don't know, it's a Lyft like Uber driver, and he's killing people for real and live streaming, and everybody's saying that it's fake as fuck in the comments section, and it sort of felt like that for me. And we don't actually know in this case whether it's real or not real, because the film begins with a video from the person who created the game saying that it's been leaked early on the dark web, it's not fully in development, and people are committing real murders based on, like in the video game, and live streaming without realizing that it's not part of the game. And that, to me, in itself is absolutely fascinating, because I love Cronenberg, as I've said already, and as people know, and it's very existence for me. Very much about that film, about the blur between reality and what's not reality when it comes to playing a video game. And there's a great quote from the film. I mean, there's no audible, there's not none. There's very little audible dialogue. It's a lot like Flow in that way. Very anxiety inducing, very little dialogue said out loud. But one of the subtitles that appears on the screen, or title cards that appears on the screen, says there's no more real life. So it's no more like real life versus game. It just becomes the complete blur, which I think is sort of how we're heading these days with technology, if not necessarily games. I mean, I'm not a gamer, but I'm on Letterboxd all the time. And it's sort of like Letterboxd is my life. It's part of who I am. It's part of what I'm doing. It's sort of like in my brain, even though it's on the phone. I think the film speaks to where we're sort of heading in a culture and sort of getting that involved in the things that we are doing online. There's more that I could say about the film, but I feel like I should give somebody else a chance to speak. The only thing which I think I'd also say is just the music score is absolutely amazing. It's very powerful. It's just constantly going on there. And it's sort of interesting that Arthur said that nothing much happens, because I think he's right, but just the anxiety levels that I got from that music score and this live stream wall of comments on the side there just really put me on edge there, because we don't know whether it's fake, we don't know whether it's real, we don't know how deluded or not the players are, and all of this is happening and anybody could be dying, whatever, at any moment. We don't actually know, because we're actually at this age where there is no longer this sort of idea of real life and being on the keyboard. It's just sort of, it's all one. It's all one and all encompassing. I'm sorry, I will let somebody else speak now, but I did watch this film when I was unwell and I felt really sick afterwards. I actually had to lie down and have a sleep for an hour. And even though that makes it sound like a film that I hated, I just loved how powerful it was for me that I was unwell. It was making me feel worse, and I'm going, gee, this is such a powerful film. It's bringing out such a strong reaction to me. So thank you so much for Arthur for putting the film this my way. Based on my reactions to Gummo and films like that, I would have never prioritized this, but this was right up my alleyway.
That's what made the score so fascinating to me. It's by Burial, and it's a very dissonant and high energy score, but he's actually somewhat of an ambient musician. So I find that to be incredibly talented on his end.
So I also thought Baby Invasion was great, and I couldn't believe it, honestly. I was pretty sure this was something that existed for the meme value, essentially. I thought it was some experimental puzzle from Queen, and it is. It really is, but it's one of the trippiest films I have seen, and there's layers upon layers of violence here that's so interesting. So you have elements that are like extremely bad video game graphics, moving to like old school, like 20, 30 years ago video game graphics, to mobile phone video game graphics, two different versions of reality. And I think Saul mentioned this idea that you're kind of trying to entangle your head what's real, what's not. Like, is the main game, if you will, the main violent home invasion we're watching like augmented reality and they're really killing people, or is that the game? But you also have something that's even more real than that. That's definitely or most likely real, because that's literally the character. Like, you see the people who are playing the game, they're wearing the same masks in those scenes. So you have these levels upon levels upon levels. I also think that on the topic of the meme, it really is a meme for a moment. It's a meme of permanently online culture, like you said, Zoomer culture to a point. I think we're all in the generation above that. But it's like just the live stream too. I was actually reading it part of the time, and a lot of it, like, I'm not sure how they did the live stream, because in multiple different languages, there's all that stuff as well. But they did follow along the story to a point that often seemed believable. So that was pretty cool. And I also thought that, yes, like, this really mimics like the idea of, hey, you're watching a game stream. It had similar things. One of the things that pulled it down for me and made it not a favorite is just how much it kind of repeats itself or stays in the same place. Like, like a live stream, you literally have like long period of wait while, you know, the characters are moving through like the actual location. So you have like these driving scenes and all of the characters are standing there awkwardly with like video game motions of how they control their guns, like getting their guns ready, moving their knives, things like that, with the chat open at the same time. And when they are at the home invasion, like there's little mini games as well that gets a lot of attention, like this biking around, and then there's just like the chill part where they're just kind of partying or standing around, and there's comments. It has a realism to it, like as crazy as it sounds off that stream, but you have all those other elements tackled in. It is, without actually being super graphic, it is hyper violent in just the context of what we're seeing. It's such a special and unique film. I think that we often talk about how there's no real new ways of making films, and this is definitely something entirely new. Like, yes, we have had games within video games before, we have all kind of experimentation before, but this feels truly special, and Arthur might very well be right that this is a film that will be talked about even more in 10, 20 years, or it just becomes like a cult classic of sorts. But I think this film has to have an afterlife in one way or another.
So now I feel like Sol felt when he watched Bird. I feel like I've watched a completely different film to everyone else. But I say watched loosely because, admittedly, I only got through the first 20 minutes. And the same thing that's happened to Sol was happening to me. I was getting a headache because I was just too distracted because there was too much information on screen. The moment the wall of text came up, and it was just flowing too fast. You can't read everything. You can't watch that and see what's happening on the screen. And I get that that's to replicate what people are watching when they're watching people streaming and playing games. But it was too distracting for me. There was just too much information. I couldn't sit back and just relax and immerse myself into it. And I usually enjoy unconventional and out there cinema, but it didn't work for me at all. And it was not because of what is shown on screen. I know there's no issues with the violence, it wasn't effective, and you know, it was just the way it's presented didn't work for me. Whenever the wall of text was removed, there was some really cool imagery, like the poster depicts a large virtual reality baby's head coming out of the water, and that scene really worked for me. I wanted more stuff like that. But a comparison point for me, because it's rare that I don't finish a film at a start, would be something like August Underground, where it was just bludgeoning the viewer over the head, being provocative without being meaningful and not really having any storytelling. That was what it felt like for me watching Baby Invasion. I may go back and watch the remaining hour later on today if I'm feeling brave, just because of how much praise you guys are heaping on it. But if it's more of the same, it's going to be a strong dislike for me. It just baffles me how a group of cinephiles can rate something like this so highly, but I know that I'm the odd one out here. So hey ho, everyone who's listening, I'm sure you're intrigued by this conversation. Go and watch it and make your own mind up.
I'll just jump in and say that I do think the whole film is more of the same, although you get some intentionally poor graphics parts in there also, but a lot of it is just more of the same. But I did like the wall of text there, because I actually feel that I could rewatch the entire film and get a completely different experience out of it by focusing just on the wall of text rather than the actions. I think this time round was a little bit too focused on what the baby invaders were doing and whether or not they were actually committing real violence against these people that may or not be real, as opposed to the wall of text. I think it would be quite fascinating to rewatch the film and just go through that wall of text, even if you had to play at a slower frame rate in order to take it all in. I think just the reactions would be fascinating in themselves.
So you would happily just watch 80 minutes of a wall of text of random comments that are overlaid over a film? That just sounds strange and bizarre to me. I'd rather just go and watch another film.
You do know that Saul loves Michael Snow, right? I mean, one of his favorite films is literally just words on the screen.
Yes, and if anybody doesn't know, the film that Chris is talking about is So Is This, which is absolutely fantastic and is just words on screen. So words on screen can be fascinating, and I guess for me it's sort of like once I've got the narrative of what the baby invaders have done, it'll be interesting to focus on the other part. It's sort of like an audio commentary, I guess, in a way, that I'd be focusing on what's being said about what's happening rather than what's being happening. I don't know. I guess just because the film gave that such a strong reaction to me, I'm just feeling I would be interested in doing that, but probably not immediately. But at some point, I'd be curious to see how that sort of experience would add up.
So, Tom, let's see how we feel about your third favorite film of the year.
So my third favourite film of the year is Dune Part 2. And I suppose for someone who was raised on the original Star Wars trilogy, the Dune saga filled a gap in my life I didn't know existed, but now I'm eagerly awaiting each new instalment of the Dune saga with bated breath. Denis Villeneuve gave us the best film of 2021 with Dune, in my humble opinion at least. And this sequel is a worthy follow-up that returns to the desert planet Arrakis to follow Paul Atreides as he seeks revenge against those who tore apart his family. This is one of the most beautiful sci-fi epics to ever grace the big screen, and I was lucky enough to view this on an IMAX screen, and it was such an immersive and breathtaking experience that will stay with me forever. The visuals are nothing short of astonishing, with the action set pieces ramping up from the first film and feeling incredibly intense as we come to know and care about the characters even more. I feel it'd be a disservice to not mention the stunning black and white cinematography during the gladiatorial combat that takes place on the Harkonnens planet as a way of introducing the film's primary antagonist and showcasing his cruel ways. That was utterly fantastic. I think the only disappointment I can level at this astonishing film is not too dissimilar from my reservations towards the first. It is merely a part of a grander story, and despite its intimidating runtime, I was still disappointed with how and where it ended. I longed for more. I wanted it to go on. I was lost in this world and I was happy to stay in there for hours. I cannot wait for Dune Messiah to be released. I'm glad that we're going to get more to the story, and I know we're in for another incredible ride with Villeneuve at the helm.
So we tried to get Saul to see this movie, and he refuses, despite being the top-rated one on Letterboxd. And sadly, Arthur could not get to see it either. So I'm not going to be commenting here, and I'm not as warm on this film or the first Dune as you, but I do think both are great films, and I think that this is the standard of what I want from blockbusters. This is about as amazing as it can get, especially in terms of cinematography. It's beautiful, the way that you capture the different planets, like you mentioned, different tones, desert cinematography. It's excellent. You can feel the inspiration from David Lean as well still in this one. It's so well done. I think that the acting is top notch throughout. You managed to develop pretty strong characters in this story as well. There's a huge character gallery. Most of them manage to shine. It's a really dynamic sci-fi action epic, and I don't know what else I can add to what you were saying here, but yes, Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, great films. Can't wait for Dune Messiah. This is probably going to go down as maybe not the Lord of the Rings of this era, but somewhere close to that, and it's very deserved.
Hearing that Lord of the Rings comment actually makes me want to see it even more. It was just circumstance, that's why I couldn't see it in time for this podcast episode, but I tend to enjoy sci-fi and fantasy when it just comes down to the lore and world building, because, plot-wise, you usually get the same stuff, like the more immature guy having his arc to slowly become a better leader. But, Dune seems to be a huge book series, which I actually wanted to try to read them before watching them, but it's 9 books, so I can't really dedicate myself to that. Still, Villeneuve, I'm not too big on him, but he can be good with big visuals. And I feel like, a huge world like this, he might actually take advantage of it quite well. So, still, even if I don't want to see it for closure, just to see everything that we're discussing in this episode, I should still have some motivation to see it. And both of you are raising some great points, actually.
It's quite interesting to hear that reaction from Arthur, because I absolutely hate lore and world building when it comes to sci-fi. I think I've said this before, I don't really like soft sci-fi. I preferred hard sci-fi that are actually about science fiction ideas, such as, time travel. I'm not really interested in sci-fi films which are more about the adventure part of it. I understand that Star Wars is part of that universe. And for anybody who's getting antsy about my comments, we are planning at some stage to do a Why Does Soul Hate Sci-Fi Adventures podcast, so more might come out of that upcoming episode. But I was planning to see Dune 2. I actually watched the David Lynch Dune when it was re-screened in cinemas for its 40th year anniversary last year. First time I'd ever seen the Lynch version, and I didn't like it, and I thought that would motivate me to watch the Villeneuve films, but unfortunately it hasn't, or at least it hasn't yet.
I mean, but if you don't like world building, Dune is not for you. Dune is almost entirely world building. It's setting up a story. It's not as conventional as you think, Carter, because it's meant to critique like that stereotype of the lone hero. So that will be really interesting to see how he plays it out and how much he adopts. I haven't actually read the original book series either, so all of what I know about it is from secondhand information. But it sounds like a really interesting story arc. And just one thing I should mention is that the film really one of the things that's so different about it, or maybe not completely different, because it's kind of similar to what Christopher Nolan did with Batman, is to cement it a bit more in our world, like the technology they have, the spaceships they have, everything. What Villeneuve has done is basically make it look closer to what we have on the planet Earth. Like you can really feel like, oh yeah, that thing could really, really fly. This looks like a helicopter. This looks like XYZ. And like he adds this kind of layer of realism to this story that works really, really well. And he manages to take all of these. I didn't praise enough the villains. Like the villains are like, on the surface of it, if you summarize them, including their looks, they're really pulpy and campy theoretically, but just by the tone, how it presents them, they become something else, almost mythological. So it definitely has some really, really nice touches here that just elevates the material, takes it in his kind of direction. And I think it's one of those things that will make the film really, and the series really stand out in the long run.
I would agree that the world building and the lore is a big part of what makes Dune such a successful series. So yeah, we'll be intrigued to hear your thoughts on it, Arthur. I think it could be a surprise hit with you, and obviously we'd love for Sol to see it, perhaps in time for the Why He Hates Epic Sci-Fi episode. But you know, we'll have to see. We'll keep convincing him. Maybe join the forum and message him and tell him that he needs to watch it to make that episode even more spicier.
Definitely, yeah. Let's bully Saul into watching Dune Part 2, especially given how he loves Letterboxd. He really should listen to the users there and see it. And I'm so happy that I finally have a film on my list I can present that's not higher up on anybody else's list. I mean, it would be nice if it was, but my top three is actually pretty much tied. So it was difficult figuring out which goes where, but on my third position, I ended up placing Ramel Ross's feature debut, Nickel Boys. And it's really one of the boldest and most daring films of the year, especially for what got a really big mainstream release. It ended up being nominated for Best Picture. And while the thematics of it, showing us lives of two African-American teenage boys in a segregated reform school, like could feel a lot like an Oscar bait type story, it's shot in a completely different way. Not just the fact what everyone talks about, that it's shot in first person, which is a big part of it. We see everything from two characters' perspective. That could have really become a gimmick, but it's not the only visual choice that Ramel Ross did here. The camera work really infused it with so much life. We grow up with our first main character, Elwood, seeing the world entirely from his point of view. But it's not just like the standard, what we probably expect, like the video game view, where you kind of just see things, like he discovers everything's happening in front of him. He's a shy boy, he looks away, he avoids eye contact, his thoughts drift away, and the camera follows where he goes, or his perspective. And it feels odd to say about the film that is shot from that first person view, but the flow and the type of images there are really Malick-esque. Ross has cited the Tree of Life as inspiration, and it can be felt. The camera work, yes, it has a vantage point, but it still feels free. It's bucking convention, it's finding beauty in what's rarely caught on the screen. And that's where it really just removes any shred of what could be called a gimmick. The editing here is also just phenomenal. The way the time just drifts away. And then, as we actually get to the reform school and we're introduced to his friend Tucker, the film opens up and gets even more dynamic as we get to see Tucker's first-person view as well, with conversations between them then becoming sometimes more of a traditional, like you see both boys as they speak to each other from the other person's vantage point, but the narrative also opens up. It's also not entirely first-person, as there's these flashes to the future, which very, very elaborate camera work choices as well. That I don't want to say too much of. What I can say is that we realize that something really terrible has happened at this school, and that starts to build suspense and even a sense of dread as we start seeing things in this segregated school. We start seeing violence. We start experiencing these things. And one of the most unique choices that Ross did was that it's not actually showing violence. The camera looks away. Our protagonists look away when violence happens, so we hear it often instead of we imagine it, and that's often so much more effective. It's just the type of cinema I have never seen before. There's so few first-person films made to begin with, but the fact that it's infused with this really poetical and unique style just elevated it. And I would honestly say at this point that this is the best American film of the decade, and I do think it will have a very, very long shelf life.
I won't be in complete agreement with you, but it's a fantastic film, that's for sure. I find that it almost kind of goes into an essay film in a way, considering how they use some of the archival footage in various scenes, and because of that, it made it a lot more effective in that regard. But I do have to be in agreement with the camera work. It's so calculated with how it is. How, like, when it scans forward, there's multiple items that go in and out of focus. It's really, like, telling you what to look at and when to look at it, which I really loved. And it kind of gives me hope for how Hollywood might be quite soon, because this actually had a decent-sized budget and was received quite well. And I remember when we were talking about the halfway point to this, to the decade, and I mentioned that Hollywood is about to collapse, and I think we're going to be at the point where we have a new Hollywood movement. And on top of this, there's also that Tom Hanks and Zemeckis film called Cure, which I can't believe I'm saying this, but it was an experimental film. I didn't love it, but just seeing that he was doing something like that on top of a film like this, I think we're going to reach a very interesting time with Hollywood.
I wasn't overly impressed with Nickel Boys, unfortunately. The fact that Chris describes it as one of the best American film of the decade, that baffles me. But, you know, each their own, I suppose. So for me, it seemed like there was a powerful and important story to tell with Nickel Boys, but the unusual style detracted from its clout. There is some nice cinematography. I agree that the camera work and the editing is impressive, but it detracted. I think that a more conventional approach would have worked much better with the material. The story seems to take a backseat to the cinematics, which for me is a crying shame because the story is fascinating and could have been the backbone for a very powerful drama indeed, but the focus on the cinematics just acted as a distraction and took away from the power of the story. It wasn't a total failure for me, but it did feel like somewhat of a missed opportunity.
I think I pretty much just have to echo Tom in terms of my appreciation of the film. It wasn't completely worthless for me, but for me the photography was extremely distracting, especially what Arthur liked about it, the certain objects coming noticeably in and out of focus. For me, that really threw me off, and probably, actually I don't know if it's been mentioned yet, but just the fact that the photography style limits how much we can empathize with the actors. We rarely see their faces, and we actually barely ever see them in the same shots. So I found it really hard to actually get to know them as human beings and get to sort of feel for their struggles. because you're not really seeing them emote, and you're not seeing them emote together. So for me, it was just very distancing. And the film seems to have all these important things to say about unchecked power in corrupt institutes, cover-up, racism, but just the point of view style for me was just way too distracting, and yeah, just totally unfortunate. It took me out of the film.
Yeah, I've noticed this commentary from a lot of people too, and it seems to be two camps here, where a lot of people just do think that the fact that they're not seeing people's faces, the fact that it's shot first person, the fact that it has a more experimental style, really takes them out of it and doesn't, like you said, like it was hard for them to connect with the characters as characters. For me, I think for a lot of other people, it has the opposite effect in that you really feel like you're in their shoes. You're associating yourself far more with these characters because you're experiencing the world through their eyes. So that might be a little bit different from just seeing them purely as characters, because to a point you kind of feel like they're you, or you feel like you're there with them in that moment. And I think that that is different. And I think that either like that's something that a lot of audiences will struggle with just because they're more driven by faces, and I think that's very natural. Or it's just because this hasn't been done that often before, and it's also a bit more experimental on top of that. So you have that distraction. Maybe if this was more normal, people would be more used to it and would be a shock to the system. Who knows? I mean, I love the unique factor of that. I don't think this will take over. But I do hope that more Malek-esque techniques become commonplace in Hollywood. And I think that, especially if we look at the Academy, we're seeing so much more in terms of cinematic experimentation coming up among the best picture nominees. So that's giving me a lot of hope. I mean, Anora had a lot of these visual touches as well. So, yes, I agree with Arthur. A lot of hope for the future. And that brings us on to our number twos. And we can start with you again, Arthur. What's your second favorite film of the year?
This is gonna make me look quite strange, and this is the entry that nobody else has seen, which is understandable considering that it's a so bad it's good film. And I will be rambling on, but I hope it'll kind of be entertaining, and I hope people will want to see it. So the director is David Dakota, who might be the most infamous director of all time, and he's actually made a whopping 176 films. And I'm kind of making it a 2 or 3 year project to see that entire filmography, which I'm at 68 right now, actually. So he's gone from every genre possible, from like hardcore gay porn to like porn without the porn, if that makes sense. Lifetime films, kids films, with a talking cat being his most infamous film. There's Edgar Allan Poe adaptations, but his most famous ones are his 80s horror comedies. However, they all stick with the same theme, that they're completely baffling and never make sense, and it feels like an alien has made these films. So he does have a huge fan base, especially with that film A Talking Cat, but his Lifetime films tend to be ignored even by those fans. And the reason why I find Lifetime films to be amusing and actually quite interesting is that Hallmark and Mar Vista are companies that I think are making the third wave of exploitation cinema. I'm talking like as big as a wave as Pre-Code and 70s Grindhouse. It's just kind of made for more of the wine mom audience, if that makes sense. And the proof that I have is that the screenwriter for this film was the screenwriter for I Spit on Your Grave, which I think says enough. So basically, it's about this young couple buying a house from this younger guy who wants to stick around for a bit to do some minor adjustments and maintenance work to the house. But he's actually a stalker. So what makes this exciting is that the villain gives what might be the most self-aware performance I've ever seen for these types of exploitation films. And perhaps one that is actually suitable for a film like this. He plays a villain that always has this death stare, and I swear every time he appears on camera you're gonna laugh at how over the top it is. And what makes this exciting is that the woman he's stalking gives the most mixed signals possible, and it makes you question what the stalker was thinking of her. For example, there's a scene where he's showering in her bathroom, and she accidentally walks in on him and he doesn't notice. So the first shot, she looks completely disturbed, and then it cuts to him. But when it cuts back to her, she's kind of like checking him out, like looking at his butt and biting her lip. But then right after, he gets out of the shower and tells her, "Oh, sorry, I just took a quick shower." She looks completely disturbed and even has nightmares about it later on in the film. And also never mentions it to her husband, So it really makes you question what she actually thought about that. And the supporting characters are also one-dimensional to the point that is quite great to watch. The next door neighbors are recent parents and are late in having a kid, and they always make sure that you have to know that fact. The very first scene they're there, they mention that, which is fine. But then the next scene, one of them's on their phone going like, oh, sorry, I'm watching the baby monitor because I'm a recent parent. And then the third time, the husband knocks on the door, and then the father comes out. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I just got a baby recently, and you're going to wake it up from the nap. And then the wife is also quite dumb because the stalker, he gets established as a killer, which I might add, he actually kills his psychiatrist mid-session and doesn't get caught, despite it being in like a crowded building. So then eventually she finds a dead body and then meets with his former fiance, and she actually asks the question, is he dangerous? Like, obviously, like, she literally saw the dead body. And the big twist is that he has cameras all over the house to stalk her, and that he's able to control the cameras with a video game controller. So, where is his stalking area? It's in the attic of the house and is legitimately a movie theater with the red curtains and 6 recliner chairs with a giant projector. So it makes me wonder if he's holding, like, stalker parties there. And when you kind of learn about filmmaking, it's kind of what makes these sort of Lifetime and Revista films interesting to watch, to see how they try to make something very efficient. Because one guy I talked to on a gaming Discord of all places worked in these types of films before and says that they basically have 2 or 3 days to film the entire film and then maybe the same amount of time to edit something. So you kind of notice these touches, like it's all stock footage for the establishing shots. They always have, like the wife would always have the same makeup despite the different clothes. And the music is always stock music. But I also loved that it was very calculated with how the editing was on top of that. Like, when he comes in, it does the done sound effect, and he's like, oh, sorry, didn't mean to scare you. And then it changes to pleasant stock music after that. So it's kind of interesting to see how forceful and calculated it was. Anyways, I'll stop rambling, but if you want a so bad it's a good film, this is the one to do.
I'm honestly very happy that you picked such a unique choice, Arthur. And like from hearing you describe Fatal Fixer-Upper, I almost want to see it. I mean, I've never enjoyed any so bad it's good film. Like even The Room was only like, okay, I can enjoy the worst parts of it, but then the rest, not really. So I'm not really the audience for these kinds of films, but like just I can really hear what you're enjoying about this film, and there's definitely other so bad it's good lovers in our audience. So you'll probably direct them to this to this film, which sounds like it could be a big hit with that demographic. So Saul, what's your third favorite film of the year?
My third favourite film of 2024 was a big surprise for me. It was a film that I saw at a horror film festival in October of 2024. So the only thing that I knew really about it was the 2 main actors in it, and it has John Lithgow in and Jeffrey Rush. And Jeffrey Rush hasn't done a lot since all the scandal when he was accused of charges of things that he didn't do that were supposedly inappropriate during a stage play. So it was really great to see him back on screen. And John Lithgow is an amazing actor. The film is, of course, The Rule of Jenny Penn, which has, at the time of our recording, just recently finally dropped on streaming services. What the film is about, it's about a judge who's confined to a wheelchair after having a stroke and placed in a nursing home where he gets on the bad side of a psychotic resident. The film boasts 2 exceptional lead performances, and John Lithgow has this menacing hand puppet which goes to the title of the film. What really makes the film tick, though, is the fact that nobody believes Rush's wild claims of Lithgow tormenting him because he has no proof, and Lithgow always provokes him into having violent outbursts in public by remaining eerily calm and composed. Between Rush being constantly disbelieved and Lithgow possessing a staff card that allows him to access any room, the film drums up an incredible amount of dread and anxiety. For me, it was like a living nightmare put to screen. The lead performance are the best thing about the movie, but it also has an amazing music score with drum beats, microphone feedback, and it's often just quietly mixed in. There are some things which were left a little bit unanswered. For me, I think also just like the lack of security cameras or security footage inside the building. But for me, just the overwhelming fear, dread, and anxiety and not knowing what to do about it. What really sort of gets to me about the film is that as important as the judge may have been in the outside world, when placed in the aged care facility, he just seems like another senile resident. It's just such an interesting fall from grace also, and it just sits really well alongside recent films like Unsane from Steven Soderbergh, which really taps into just how helpless you can be when placed inside a care facility. I just love films about dread and anxiety, so for me this was just a top-tier horror film. What did you guys make of The Rule of Jenny Penn?
It came as a complete surprise to me, to be honest. In many ways, it really blew me away. I was taken by the performances. I was taken by the horror of it. I completely see your comparison to Unsane. It's kind of like Unsane meets The Father with a bit of not quite misery, but like. What is so powerful here is the realism of it all. I mean, this is not a supernatural horror film. This is essentially the terror of you becoming older, you having physical weaknesses. In the case of the different Rush characters, he's in, like you said, he's in a wheelchair. He can barely stand with a cane. He can't really move. And you have this menacing bully finding joy in his miserable life by torturing those around them, physically, mentally, in every which way he can. And it can be a bit over the top, I suppose. And like you said, like, where are the cameras? Where's the staff? Why is no one noticing anything? But Lithgow plays it brilliantly. Jeffrey Rush plays it brilliantly. And yeah, you can really feel like this could happen to you as you get older. You could really be in this situation. Anyone could really be in this situation. Like you mentioned as well, this idea of not being believed, the terror of that. You know, also the fact of age, the fact that you're slipping away, the fact that you can't even defend yourself. All of these things tie together into a really, really strong piece of psychological terror. My only critique of this film, aside from the camera work, could have been even more spectacular. This is more of a low scale. You can feel the budget a bit, but it doesn't hinder the greatness of it. Is that it would have been even more powerful for me if they had ended about 10 minutes early. I think the fact that they kind of take it to a clear resolution lowers the impact for me, but still a great film, and I'm so happy that you recommended this for me, so.
I quite enjoyed this as well. Some of the shots actually kind of reminded me of De Palma, which is amusing because Lithgow is in Blowout. And surprisingly, it's actually a tough film to analyze because I was wondering about what you two were mentioning as well, like with the cameras and no one caring and stuff like that. I actually do think that he's sort of a mystical character, if that makes sense. I kind of don't want to go into spoiler territory, but I think it has to do with Jenny Penn, the puppet that he has itself, because a lot of retirement homes tend to have like that sort of existential crisis with life and all that, and I think that's a connection it's trying to make with that film. It also kind of reminded me of another retirement home horror film that came out in 2024, and it's called Night Silence by Bartosz Kowalski. And it explores the same themes, but I actually kind of prefer that one over this one. And I think the main reason is kind of the same reason as Flow, which kind of shows what Soul's taste is into. The dread is like at its absolute peak in this film, and it was honestly kind of too twisted for me at times.
I was very intrigued by The Rule of Jenny Penn, and I have to agree with my co-host that the two lead performances were spectacular. They were great in their roles. The overarching story didn't really grab me as much as everyone else, though. I thought it was okay. It was an enjoyable film, but it didn't really blow me away. I saw James Ashcroft, who's the director, his previous film, Coming Home in the Dark, and had a similar response to that as well. He's clearly a talented director, but I think his best work is yet to come. Perhaps he's missing an element of black humour that could have strengthened this a bit more, but it just felt like it was lacking something to really make it special and a favourite film for me.
I mean, Litkov does have some of those really evil, maniacal, telling ridiculous tales and jokes, etc. moments that could go on. That's definitely dark humor. So I enjoyed that.
It's really great to hear the mostly positive reactions from the three of you, especially because this is a film that I had very little feedback on before I recommended it to the three of you. It's for me, it's a hidden gem horror film, so it's one that if I was up to doing programming duty, which I'm not this year, I'd consider programming for the ICM Forum Film Festival, because it's just one of those underseen great films, but I'm hoping in time it won't become underseen, it will get better known, because like Arthur said, as an exercise in dread, you can barely get any better, and for me, dread is the greatest type of horror film, and I wonder if that makes Flow a bit of a horror film. I was actually telling my mum, I was chatting about the podcast earlier on, I was saying Flow's the only film in my top 5 that isn't horror adjacent, but maybe it is horror adjacent.
In some ways, maybe it is. And that takes us to you, Tom, and your second favorite film of the year. I'm assuming you're not going with anything as unusual as Arthur there.
Not quite. Maybe this is a bit more conventional, but we'll see what people think anyway. So my second favourite film of the year is How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies. Now, this came along at the perfect time in my life for it to really make an impact. I sadly lost my granny just over a year ago, so it was quite a raw and upsetting watch for me. Yet it also helped with the healing process and was a strangely uplifting experience. It takes the age-old formula of an awkward grandchild struggling to connect with his grandma's traditional ways and values, but it does so with such delightful storytelling that it feels remarkably fresh. I'd also just like to add as a caveat that I was lucky enough not to have this disconnect with my granny, but it didn't stop moments of the relationship that was being shown on film coming through as familiar and relatable to me as their relationship grew throughout the film. Although it's a gentle Thai drama, there are still moments of humour throughout, and the cathartic journey that the lead undergoes as he works past the clash of his modern values with his grandma's traditionalism makes for fascinating viewing. The simple plot allows for easy entry into the heartwarming journey of a young man caring for his terminally ill grandmother, initially driven by greed for his potential inheritance, but eventually motivated by far more than just finances. Its considered pacing allows us time to connect with the characters and understand their motivations, making it even more gut-wrenching when the emotional upheaval hits hard towards the film's finale. For a debut feature, this is quite the accomplishment. I'm always in awe of any film that has the power to move me to tears, and I'm very intrigued to see where director Pat Brunitipat takes us on his next outing. It's a poignant and affecting film, which will undoubtedly resonate deeply with anyone who can relate to the universal themes of family ties and making sacrifices for others. So I hope lots of people will seek this one out, because this kind of went under the radar when it's released, and I think people are sleeping on quite an impressive film here that is, after all, my second favourite of the year.
This was kind of a surprise for me. I tend to hate these I tend to hate these overly sympathetic type of films, and I felt like this was going to be the case, especially with its plot setup. And the filmmaking is kind of plain, and although some of my family members died, it wasn't really any I was close with, considering most of them are overseas and I never really met them. But surprisingly, I did enjoy this, and I think most of it is because the sentimentality is more through a slice of life sort of lens, instead of, the types that hit for those high notes that are like trying to force you to cry. And the music kind of showed that as well, because some of it kind of had a pleasant factor to it despite the sadder moments happening. So it kind of gave a interesting outlook on life. And the thing that I found the most interesting, though, was the family dynamics as she was slowly dying, because everybody's trying to fight over, wanting to get the millions from her. And there was also that dilemma based on her part too. Like, should she go to the people that have more resources to take care of her, or the one that is the closest to her? And I tend to like these family dramas, and because of those dynamics, this film did stand out to me. I wouldn't say it's a great film, but I'm still happy I've seen it.
Similar position to Arthur in that I didn't think it's a great film, but I should note that this has an 8.0 on IMDb and a 4.3 on Letterboxd. This is clearly one of the most beloved films of the year by the people who saw it. I think the main thing that I didn't fully care about this film, which Arthur already brought up, and it's the opposite as with our disagreement on Nickel Boys, is just that the camera work and the way it's made is just so conventional. There's nothing overly special there, and unlike some of my favorite films of the year that kind of overcame that, like A Real Pain, with really strong, powerful performances and powerful dialogue, How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies doesn't quite have that. Like, the acting performances are good, but none of them, except maybe the grandmother, but she's not a professional actress, and that's more of just who she is and what everything that's happening around her. Like, they're good, but they're not fantastic. So that's more or less the level of the film. I thought it had a really strong ending, and I think I just missed like a little bit more in one direction, something that to make it special. Like, it could have gone much further in on the dark comedy, given all the scheming. Like, you have another character in the film that is budding up the people for money, and which the grandson is taking inspiration from. I think that could really have played into like something like I Care a Lot territory or something like that, where it just went much darker, and it could have had a more tonal shift as they grew closer to the grandmother. I also thought that while they do grow closer, I didn't really feel the connection become that close. Like, you can feel that like it's going from pure manipulation to some care, but the connection, I never felt that their connection became truly deep. And the fact that I didn't feel that probably did stop me from absolutely loving the film as well. But it's a touching film, it's a very strong drama, and it's just an all throughout very good film. So definitely recommendable, but not one of my top films of the year.
It was interesting to hear your personal connection with the film, Tom. My grandparents have all passed away, but not recently. I'd say the last one maybe passed away 5 or 6 years ago, so I don't have that recent sort of grief to fall back on. My father did pass away a few years ago, but even so, I guess for me, the personal connection I was making with it is that she's diagnosed very early on as having cancer. And as somebody who's recently gone through treatment for cancer and technically a cancer survivor at this point, for me it just felt the wrong time of my life to be watching the film. The other thing is that I did try and start watching it after recently watching Baby Invasion, which absolutely screwed with my mind. So I did try and watch it a day after that, but I don't think I was in the right frame of mind to be able to watch this sort of film, which seemed to be about a greedy relative coming to eventually realise that he shouldn't be greedy. But I'm sure that if I try and rewatch the film down the track, where the cancer stuff is all behind me, and where I haven't just watched a Harmony Korine film that screwed with my mind, I'm sure that I'll be able to appreciate the film a little bit better. Based on the 18 minutes of the film that I managed to get through, it did seem quite well acted. Even if the camera work wasn't amazing, there were interesting parts, like the grandmother collapses and it's sort of a little bit off frame, so not really seeing the whole thing happening because he's focused on what he's doing on his phone. So there were interesting bits and pieces in there, and I guess I do look forward to watching the entire film one day, but not at this point in my life.
I just found that comment kind of amusing because I'm a cancer survivor myself, but I couldn't connect to it because I was too young to remember it. So I guess oddly lucky, but unlucky at the same time.
Seeing as you like Letterboxd so much, Sol, you might be interested to know that I watched this film purely because it turned up on the Letterboxd Top 250 one day, which I do try and keep a track of. I used to love the IMDb Top 250, but I got bored of that ages ago with all the films that were entering that list. But Letterboxd Top 250 still retains some interest. So I'm glad that helped to put it on the radar for me. And just to respond to the comments about the film with the cinematography perhaps not being up to scratch, so to speak, I suppose from my perspective it's simple yet effective storytelling in it. I don't feel that it needed radical cinematography to kind of support the story. I think it's effective enough, just stripped down as it is. But I can certainly see why people who want a bit more from their films could see that as a drawback. But overall, this was a great discovery for me, and I hope others discover it too.
And from the fact that it's on the Letterboxd Top 250 and the high rating everywhere, people really need to check it out, regardless of what the rest of us are saying. Moving on to you, Saul, what's your second favorite film of 2024?
Speaking of Letterboxd, my second favourite film of 2024 is a film that I knew about on Letterboxd for quite some time. The poster kept popping up. It kept coming up as films popular with my friends, living overseas obviously, because they hadn't been released here yet, and films that were popular and being talked about. And it took me quite a while to see it because I can't remember why exactly. I think I had a few things on for a few weekends, so it's already been out for a few weeks. So I saw it quite late into it, and I had quite a few reservations, and I guess because of that, it just absolutely blew me away. The film is I Saw the TV Glow by Jane Schoenbrunn, which is just an absolutely fantastic film. It stars Justice Smith, who was the most annoying character ever in the Dungeons and Dragons movie, so please don't let that put you off, because he's completely different in the film. And the film is about Smith basically recollecting his fascination with a horror-adjacent television show in the 1990s, and a friendship with a girl who loved the show even more than him. The film was marketed as a horror movie, and it got some poor feedback from people who are horror fans, and it's not a traditional horror flick, so I understand that. However, there are some Videodrome references later on in the film, and without saying too much, I think the film plays around with some perception and relative reality-bending ideas, so I do think it's definitely horror-adjacent. There's lots of personal identity themes too, and a lot about the difficulties of existing in society where those who are different are shunned, etc. In the 1990s, we've got the Justice Smith character who's possibly on the spectrum and possibly LGBTI identifying, and is this friend who's got an androgynous lesbian and coming out of the closet. What as a teenager wasn't really a thing in the 1990s. So you've got sort of all that built up energy which is driving the film. But beyond all the personal identity, reality and reception ideas, the film's just an amazing meditation on the experience of watching something on indeed an glowing television set, and disillusionment when watching films as an adult that scared you as a kid. That's wonderfully tapped into in the film, as well as how impossible it is to recapture your own wonderment as a child at something new and mind-opening. I don't really want to say too much more about the film, but I'll just say that the colours look absolutely fantastic throughout, with the neon in there, the sharp blues, the sharp pinks and purples often are favoured. It's an incredibly interesting film, and I think after this, I watched the other film that Jane did, We're All Going to the World's Fair, and I thought that was absolutely fantastic, and I'm not sure if I would have liked it that much without I Saw the TV Glow as an introduction to Jane's work first, because I just absolutely loved it in ways that I didn't expect to, because I'm sort of not on that LGBTI hue. I'm not in that part of the rainbow, so I'm really amazed that this film works so well for me, but it did.
I Saw the TV Glow is special in so many ways, and it has a lot of raw power there. I mean, I can see why people thinking it would be a horror film and who primarily love horror film would react negatively to it. This is, like, in some ways, there even comparison to Baby Invasion, because this has this kind of trippy atmosphere. It has this neon-coated visuals, but this is not like of this generation or futuristic. This is far more in terms of nostalgia. And I think that as a child who grew up in the 90s, and I think a lot of our children, a lot of life gets brought into TV shows, and like you kind of empathize with the characters, you get sucked into it, it becomes part of like the weekly rota, you can connect over them as well. It's just a very special experience, especially when you have this deep fandom and it connects. And I think the film ties into that in a very powerful way that you don't need to, be in the LGBTQ plus community to get, but it also has this super trippy reality bending ideas that you love from Cronenberg, and the Cronenberg fans will definitely get a lot out of this film and its premise, which I also don't want to spoil either, but the way that it starts to become unsure of reality, the way that these kids start being unsure if what they're seeing on TV is more real than the world they're in right now. This kind of fear and suspicion of it, but also this like existential dread of just living in the world. Like it covers so much ground, and it does it through the guise of genre, and that's something very, very, very special. And well, it's not on my top 10 or top 20. It's definitely one of the most memorable films of the year, and it's a great film, and I would highly recommend it to everyone. At least everyone who's kinda understands a little bit of what we're speaking about there and has some of those interests.
I also really enjoyed I Saw the TV Glow. I would agree that it's more horror adjacent than horror, which kind of might go some way to explaining some of the negativity towards it. I mean, the atmospherics are incredible. The neon glow, the visuals are superb. There's a scene involving a ice cream man that's just going to stay with me forever. I loved it. I kind of wish there was more moments like that within the film, but I appreciate it for what it is. The great sense of mystery and nostalgia. Scenes in the observatory as well, looking at the star constellations, were great. I was kind of surprised, Sol, that you went back to We're All Going to the World's Fair and enjoyed that. I saw them in the opposite order to you because there's quite a bit of buzz around We're All Going to the World's Fair, and that one fell flat for me. I was just bored. I thought it was dull. Nothing really happened there. So found I Saw the TV Glow to be a big step up, and I'm very excited to see what the director makes for us next.
Sorry, I wasn't holding the mic there. I could definitely see the connection with the queer community. Like, I'll definitely keep it as vague as possible. But considering that I am one myself and obviously my partner as well, this is a very important film now, especially considering the discourse around it. I'd say the flaw of it is that, I know it sounds kind of weird to say, but it's too nostalgia based on two different time periods. So I think unlike Baby Invasion, this is too much of a product of its time. And I don't think it's going to age as well as it goes on, especially if the discourse around these topics do change. But still, I am glad that this came out, and I think a lot of people should watch it, despite some of the segments kind of being too high school PSA, if that makes sense, in trying to explain its themes. But overall, I definitely enjoyed it.
It's really nice to hear those positive reactions about the film, because I do follow quite a few horror fans on Letterboxd, and the reactions have been a little bit mixed there. It's an interesting point about the nostalgia there, Arthur, and I suppose nostalgia in the way might trivialize or maybe put some of the queer stuff on the back burner, and it becomes a lot more about nostalgia. But I guess for me, as somebody who doesn't identify as being queer, or at least not on the main part of the rainbow, for me, I guess the nostalgia was maybe my biggest in for it. I mean, I don't know if I'd really say that I grew up in the 90s, because I was very young in the 90s, but I still remember, old television sets. I remember watching films on VHS. So I do have a little bit of the nostalgia in there. So the nostalgia, I guess, was a real in for me. Even though I love the queer stuff, I guess I couldn't relate to it. I could definitely relate to the 90s nostalgia. With what you said, Tom, about we're all going to the World's Fair, yeah, I don't know. I guess just watching it afterwards. I mean, I sort of knew about the film beforehand, but it had very mixed reviews. And since I saw the TV Glowers came out, we're all going to the World's Fair has been reevaluated. It's now got a much higher rating on Letterboxd, and that's sort of what drew me towards it. For me, it's another identity film. For me, they're both films about personal identity. And I guess for me, we're all going to the World's Fair is about the sort of identity you have when you have a persona online, which I could really relate to. But the episode is not about we're all going to the World's Fair, even though it's a film that everybody should go out and check out, because it's still got less than 400 checks on iCheck Movies, so it's not that well seen. I'm not going to spend the whole episode going on about it, but they're both very structurally similar also, especially with some of the fourth wall breaking that goes on, not to spoil too much about it. For me, the films really go hand in hand. I do prefer I saw the TV Go just because the neon visuals are that much stronger, but for me, they're both incredibly dynamic films, and likewise, I can't wait to see what Jane comes up with next.
And just to point out that like incredibly different response to this movie. Like on IMDb, it has a 5.8 from 35,000, but on Letterboxd, it has a 3.5 out of 5, which is quite good from over 600,000 viewers. So it's like night and day in some ways. It's a film that clearly has a huge following with the more with people who use Letterboxd, which I think stereotypically tend to be younger cinephiles. So really interesting to see that. Moving on to my second favorite film of the year, which is almost like a strong contrast to I Saw the TV Glow in some ways. Because this is kind of like the film that, despite flying under the radar this year, sadly, this feels like a kind of film that would 10, 20 years ago have picked up a lot of tractions at film festivals at the very least. The film is Emmanuel Parvos' 3 Kilometers to the End of the World. A powerful drama of semi-epic proportions and strong black comedy undertones, and punches and critiques in just all directions, from corruption to social conservatism. Our focus is on characters from a rural community and how they respond to a 17-year-old boy being violently assaulted, with the family moving from anger to shame as they discover that he is gay. It's quite a powerful indictment of social views in Romania today. And for anyone who have seen and loved the recent Netflix mega hit Adolescence, there are some comparisons here actually. But in this case, with everyone pretty much doing the wrong thing, the film is in a way procedural, moving between characters and letting these different perspectives lead the story, with long takes and almost real-time feel as the film goes between the family in turmoil, to the boy in contrast to them, to his friend trying to help, to a somewhat bumbling investigation, to the father of the perpetrator. All of these narratives playing out step by step and building on each other. And one thing that is most impressive here is that it could so easily have fallen into caricature, especially with the comedic elements. But instead, all the characters here have a degree of nuance to them. They are not just bad, bigoted people doing terrible things, but people struggling with their conscience and trying to do what they think is the right thing for them and their family. A lot of it highly immoral, but from their perspective, this is the best action for them. There's a lot of love and raw pain here, and it felt quite beautifully at times, and quite like heartbreaking at times as well. Knowing me, of course, one of the things that really blew me away here was the cinema. It's just shot so bloody well. There are excellent long takes. It's just so dynamic and vivid. Like the early examination scene, for instance, having the camera move through that room as the police doctor traces the wounds of the boy, showing us his family, the police, the boy, the uncomfortable tension, just moving through. It's just so incredibly cinematic, and I just wish more films looked, felt, and moved like this. As some of you might have guessed from the description, and a lot of our regular listeners know how much I love and the Romanian New Wave. Yes, the film has many of the traits that have made Romanian films stand out in the last few decades, but it's not as overtly minimalist or art house as many of these films tend to be. This is not Jude at all, or even Mungyu, though it's closest to Mungyu, if anything. It managed to avoid being overtly cold to its benefit, and through that it lets its characters come to life and to feel the mixed emotions everyone has about the situation at hand, which is just a really powerful and like kind of gnawing experience as the tension builds and builds and builds. But I know that not all of you were as warm on this film as I was.
I was quite warm on it, Chris. I liked it. And I was chuckling to myself then as well that it wouldn't be a best of the year podcast without you mentioning Radu Jude at some point. So I like how you got him in there. Even though this film is far removed from his cinema, even though it hails from Romania, much more of a conventional film here, and perhaps that's why I enjoyed this more. The performances were great. As you said, the cinematography was nice, quite subtle, but it enhanced the story. And the elements of it being quite a thriller and unraveling the mystery as the film progressed, it was very intriguing. It hooked me in from early on. I was curious as to how the film would pan out, and it did go in some unexpected directions. So this was quite a nice discovery for me, and one that I probably wouldn't have seen were it not for your recommendation. So yeah, I'm pleased I watched this.
This is the second of the two entries that I wasn't really into at all. So I did, since you mentioned the various plot points, I did enjoy the minimal yet, I guess you could say, efficient police investigation, where like it was just going to the right people and asking random questions. That was quite entertaining to see. I also did enjoy that they kind of explored the parents' side more when they found out that he was gay. It kind of gave a different perspective on how they tried to justify it. Especially with that one ridiculous scene, which, when you mentioned, it was kind of funny to see, even though it was incredibly homophobic. But it's more of a personal thing, but I kind of grew into disliking this sort of film. Like you said, it's not full-on cold, but it's one of those, like, art house European minimalist style. And I guess you could say that a lot of them kind of tried to go for that Bellatar approach, even though the mood of this is different. But these types of films just kind of miss that magic that his types of minimalism films have. And the other thing I find strange about this is that this is an important film for Romania because they aren't treated as well, but at the same time it's an art house film, so I can't really see as convincing people in that country, because this is much more of a festival kind of film, if that makes sense, rather than one that like a random person in Romania would watch.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't really know their watching habits, to be honest. I don't know how popular the Romanian New Wave kind of films were. I think some of them actually were hit, and some of them did cause a splash. So, and like I said, this is not like a full-on art house film. It's somewhere in between. So I can see general audiences coming to it, but at the same time, if they know the subject matter, maybe not. I mean, if they have these views, they're probably not going to see it. A bit like how Georgians are unlikely to see Wet Sand, for instance. So who knows? But even if they're not seeing it, to me, it was very powerful. But we can flip it back to you, Leonardo, because we have finally gotten there. We have gotten to the point where we all reveal our number one favorite films of 2024. And once again, we can start with you. So which film was it that took the crown for you?
This does show the importance of research, because I literally just found out this film randomly, and it is a film that I think everybody here loves, which shows that we got to start doing that as cinephiles. So for my...
was that the one who recommended it to you?
I think I was the first one to watch it, actually.
Oh, all right.
I don't know. We'll have to look up Letterboxd to figure it out. Actually, should we do that right now? If you have, like, when you checked it. I'm just looking it up for me because you got me too curious.
I saw it on the 14th of February.
14th of February. Let me see. Oh, February 26th. Oh, wow. You must have been right.
Nice. I'll take credit then.
Yeah, well, regardless, it shows the importance of research, right? So,
indeed.
So, my choice is Soliman's Story. I kind of am a fanboy of the genre because it's basically about the poor immigrant, or not even an immigrant in some cases, going through a monotonous job but having so much stakes involved. So it's basically like Sean Baker's Takeout, which is my favorite Sean Baker film. And I actually found out, I didn't see it yet, but there is an Indian film called Baki Vanavar that's apparently the same thing, so I gotta see that ASAP. And it's from 2022, so if it's good enough, it could make our film festival next year. So basically, it also explores the Uber Eats style work and does a fantastic job of showing the monotony of going through that, but it shows how intensive for that employee, since they have the stressful part of it in general on top of the stress of their personal life. So this kind of felt like the new wave of Italian neorealism in a way, because it has the use of non-professional actors in their realistic situations, so they're able to provide a more realistic experience since they've actually lived through it. And then they use the use of pathos and empathy that is still realistic but almost overwhelming, but not in a bad way. It shows the effectiveness of keeping something so basic but how much it could still elicit emotion. So I think the biggest reason why this was so good was the use of non-professional actors. On top of that, which I do have to mention, Abu Zangar did what is the best performance of the year. It was his first time acting too, and he absolutely killed it, and I'm happy that he won a Caesar award for that as well. The realism he provides on top of the emotional response, he's absolutely gonna break your heart into a million pieces in this film. Especially with that one scene where, I'm sure if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. On top of it being a film with these fantastic performances, it is stressful cinema, which some of us seem to be a fan of, and I also am a fan of the camera work because it shows the chaos of the job. It's clearly a camera on another bike, so it gives a more intimate yet chaotic feel for it, so it kind of makes you feel immersed and closer to the character.
I love Sullivan's Story, and this was my fifth favorite of the year. It could be my fourth as well. It's just an absolute masterpiece, and the whole film just has such a hectic and desperate energy, and I'm always talking about films with that desperate energy where you just feel the emotional turmoil of the character in every single scene. You have that visceral chase against time, and like you mentioned, like it's for such a menial job, but like this Uber Eats, just being able to pick up the orders, delivering them, scraping by, like any order, any minute he loses is a lack of money, and he needs that money. He's so behind. I mean, it's not even his. He's renting another account, and it kind of digs into the exploitation and the suffering that all of these asylum seekers face because they are not allowed to work, and they need money to live. Like this is a man who lives in a homeless shelter and then just works and has no real life. And I also really love the kind of poetic duality or triple nature of title, because one thing I don't think you mentioned in big detail is that there's really three types of stories that belong to this man. He's trying to pass his asylum interview by presenting a fake story and become a refugee. And he's all the time while he's biking around, he's learning this fake story. So he's trying to make this his story. At the same time, we're watching his story, and of course, there's the real story of why he left in the first place. All of these three playing together beautifully. It's just so powerful. Like you said, beautifully acted. Like the tempo is so high. It's stressful, despite being like at almost Dardenne brother style drama. Like it's also almost feels like a high pressure thriller. A comparison point I can point to is Full Time from a few years ago, also from France, but that doesn't hit on as many like big issues as this film does, and I think it has been overlooked. It shouldn't be as overlooked as it is. Like obviously it was very seen in France, but I don't think it's gotten as big a following abroad, and this really needs to be heralded as one of the big films of 2024 because it is that special, it is that important to our current moment, and it does have that powerful cinema. So yeah, I could not recommend this film more, and I think it's a film that pretty much anyone can enjoy, no matter what.
I absolutely loved Solomon's Story, as I mentioned earlier on, because I spoiled it. It was my number 6 of the year. There's obviously parts that I really like in it because I'm really into anxiety-induced and stressful cinema, or the dread in there of going through his daily routine. That really worked for me, and it's got really frantically paced, and it becomes a bit differently paced in the final half hour, which initially I thought was a misstep, but the intense conversation of the second last scene was actually really the highlight for me, as well as the way the camera angles shift in and out during that scene. And I think a lot of people would say a lot of things about the work routine and the anxiety and what it's like to be an asylum seeker, but for me, I guess one of the most striking things about the film was the way it's shot. The camera is frequently fixed right behind him, moving in motion with him as he walks down the streets and pedals through the roads. There's an amazing blue heavy color scheme, which sort of made Paris seem really magical despite all the stress that he's undergoing. And for me, the film just really, really worked. I thought the ending was absolutely pitch perfect. And one of the things which I was going to say is that this is one of only 2 films since we've been doing these best of year podcasts that 3 of us actually had in our top 10 of the year. But it's actually one of 3, because I didn't realize that the other 3 people in this podcast will have Anora in the top 10. But we've got Anora, and we've got Solomon's Story, which is also in 3 of our top 10s, and one more film to come a little bit later on.
I also really enjoyed Suleiman's Story. It's a very powerful drama. I didn't find it as anxiety-inducing as everyone else. I love stressful, anxiety-inducing cinema. I seek it out. I like that feeling. But I didn't get that from this. Maybe I've just become immune to it. Chris mentioned comparison point with Full Time, which I thought was a lot more stressful and anxiety-inducing. But it doesn't really detract from the experience I had with Suleiman's Story. It's still hit hard. The revelation when he recounts his story towards the end was heartbreaking, and it's just a great underseen piece of cinema that I hope more people will explore, thanks to everyone on this podcast thoroughly enjoying it. So yeah, I would recommend seeking it out.
It's great to hear the film getting as much love as this. And since Saul tipped us that there's one more film that is on 3 out of 4 lists, I can reveal that that's his number 1 choice, and I think we can just have Saul present this one first, just to get just to skip into this one directly. So, Saul, what is this 3rd magical film that 3 of us managed to agree is one of the year's absolute best?
So this film was one of only 3 films that I gave a 9 out of 10 to that I saw during 2024 for the first time. I don't usually give out higher than 8 out of 10 to first-time viewings, so it's a very unusual thing. It's a film that I thought I'd like because I'm really into body horror. I'm the person who has Videodrome as their on-off number 1 of all time. And even with really high expectations, after it won Best Screenplay at Cannes, I was still impressed by it. So the film is, of course, The Substance, which is the only film since we've been recording these best of the year podcasts that 3 of us have in our top 5. So it's Tom's number 5, it's Chris's number 4 of the year, it's my number 1 of the year. I don't know what I can say about The Substance, which hasn't been said already. If you don't know about the plot, it's about a faded actress taking a black market substance that is able to temporarily restore a youth for finite periods. While the eventual breaking of all the strict product rules is telegraphed far in advance, even without the trailer spoiling it, what's interesting is how the substance totally fractures her personality to the point where she keeps talking about her other self in 3rd person. To say anything more plot-wise might spoil its fresh experience, but what I would say is that the film begins as a body horror Cronenberg tribute, but ends as something which is closer to a homage to John Frankenheimer's Seconds. The film looks and sounds amazing throughout, with voyeuristic music video in there, lots of sharp cuts, loud bursts of perfectly unsettling music, and all sorts of unusual camera angles. The performances are top-notch. Demi Moore should have won Best Actress over Mikey Madsen. I'm sorry, that's another anti-Anora plug. Margaret Qualley, absolutely amazing. Can't believe she didn't get nominated. Dennis Quaid, I can't believe he wasn't in the conversations during awards season. one of his best roles ever for Quaid as Moore's pig-headed boss, shot in unflattering close-ups that emphasize just how old and wrinkled he is, while hypocritically looking for youth and traditional beauty in everyone who wishes to cast. Yeah, I'm not sure what else to really say over here. It's just an absolutely sensational film. It was an aggressive film. I haven't rewatched it since seeing it. I just felt it was really aggressive the way I was doing it, but just in a real perfect way that feels really necessary in this current climate in which absurd beauty standards are still a thing in post #MeToo times.
I guess I can go next since it was my number 4 and I just tipped out Tom in terms of how much I loved The Substance. I mean, this film it just spends almost every genre together. I would say it's first and foremost a satire, and it's done with so much anger and venom. You can really feel all of Corey Forget's frustration and annoyance and hatred towards these beauty standards, towards the pressure that women feel, and people in general, and primarily women, feel about their bodies when they get older and how they're perceived, and she's just pouring it all out. And it's another one of those signs that times are changing in terms of what becomes popular, what becomes acceptable, what's watchable, what's mainstream. The Substance was huge mainstream, but it's such a formalist film in many ways. It's shot in unique ways, like you mentioned, a lot of very unflattering shots. Like you mentioned, Cronenberg is definitely spot on in terms of a lot of the body horror. Another one I would bring up is Lanthimos, because you use a lot of those kind of distorted lenses and like cartoonish, bleak, almost real imagery and ways it blends reality. But then it also just has this like extreme color scheme and this larger in life sensibilities. And it goes off in absolutely unhinged direction. It's visually daring, it's stylistically bold, thematically, it could even have been an essay, like it's just so personal, but at the same time so immediately understandable and accessible, and it all blends together. As someone who's not at all into body horror, I figured I might like this, I'm not gonna love it. I absolutely loved this film, and it was on 3 of our 4 top 10s, and Arthur revealed in the chat now that it is number 11. So all of us love this film. It just hits all of the bases. The acting performances are absolutely fantastic, like you mentioned. It's just such a transcendental film, and I'm so happy that a film just of this kind got this kind of huge boost into the popular consciousness. It's just amazing to see.
Just echoing your sentiments there, Chris, it always warms my heart when horror films get recognition like this into the mainstream, recognition the Oscars. And although Demi Moore was snubbed, it was still great to see her amongst the nominees for Best Actress in a Leading Role for her performance here. Taking its cues from the best of 80s body horror with many nods to Cronenberg and the like. Substance, it's a gruesome and macabre film about the lengths fading stars will go to in order to rekindle their careers. I love how it touches on the pitfalls of fame and celebrity by examining the drive for success as a dangerous drug that causes the ruin of many who become wrapped up in its world. And here the drug is an actual substance that is injected by those longing to appear younger and fresher, providing a new lease of life, but at what cost? And the side effects here cause catastrophic ripples in the life of Elizabeth as she grapples with a younger version to retain control over her body, and the twist elements of horror that emerge from this are downright disturbing, but in the best possible way. As you've both said, the cinematography and production values are excellent, showcasing the fabulous world of celebrity, alongside the juxtaposition of the repulsive elements that rear their ugly head along the way, not least with Elizabeth's dalliances with Dennis Quaid as the lecherous manager who seeks to take advantage of her at every opportunity. Now, the disgusting finale is definitely up there with the infamous scene in 80s horror Society, and I'm all for it. I really hope The Substance paves the way for more production companies to take a risk on original horror outings such as this. But I think it's probably going to be a long time before anything comes close to topping the depravity of The Substance. We'll have to wait and see.
I kind of feel bad now that it was one entry away from entering my top 10, but it shows what a strong year this was. So, The reason why I kind of wanted this to be mentioned before A Different Man is that they kind of are the same but the antithesis of each other, at least of my interpretation of it, because I also see this as being a story about body dysmorphia. And first of all, Demi Moore's performance seemed quite personal and vulnerable, and I'm really impressed that she did something like this. And because she actually might be someone that's pressured by this sort of society that we have now with Instagram and TikTok, especially with all the stuff like filters, so we don't even see the real person anymore. So basically, I think it's about body dysmorphia because it shows that you will destroy yourself slowly by reaching your final goal of trying to be the most attractive person in the room. And I think this is shown by the few workout stuff that are super male gazy because that's kind of what you want to be seen as. And at the same time, there's like those few scenes that kind of seem like porn setups because again, you just want to get worshipped. And this is a more depressing outlook, but it keeps showing that it will slowly destroy yourself the further and further and further you go into that body dysmorphia journey. And I'm kind of impressed that this film explored it that well.
I don't think I have a lot to add because one of you have been very positive on the film. I might just say that what Arthur mentioned about the comparisons to A Different Man, they are out there. On Letterboxd, the highest rated mean comment is The Substance But for Boys, while the highest rated, or I guess genuine short comment is Crazy Year for social satire centered around characters who undergo experimental treatments in an attempt to become a better version of themselves, only to realize that it's not everything they expected and subsequently spiral out of control. So I think, yeah, it's a really good companion piece, and I guess it's a bit interesting from a mirrored point of view that A Different Man was my number 11 of the year, and The Substance Arthur was your number 11 of the year. Definitely a very strong year for cinema overall.
I'm glad we all agree on that point. 2024 has been so special. So let's see if we can muster up a lot of agreement for your number one then, Tom. What managed to top the list for you?
Well, Chris, from the director of Babe and Happy Feet comes my favourite film of the year, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. George Miller's unpredictable career has always baffled me, but he is without a doubt in his element whenever he returns to the world of Mad Max. This is a superb prequel to his 2015 reboot, Mad Max Fury Road, that for my money is the better of his two latest outings, in the dingy post-apocalyptic setting that he brings to life with a unique and arresting vision. Whilst Fury Road was an incredibly impressive non-stop action film, Miller has imbued Furiosa with a grander sense of scale by focusing on character development and story, but he still finds the space for some unforgettable action set pieces along the way. This is a dark and twisted coming-of-age story, the tale of a young Furiosa who is snatched away from her parents and raised by a gallery of rogues who scavenge the wasteland, who are led by the twisted Dementus. Chris Hemsworth takes the stage as Dementus with a pitch-perfect performance as an over-the-top pantomime villain who brings much-needed comic relief into what would otherwise be an overwhelmingly dark and horrific experience. Ali LeBrown takes on the role of young Furiosa, showcasing a great depth of emotion with the character until Anya Taylor-Joy takes over when Furiosa transitions into womanhood. The world building here is nothing short of astonishing. Sol would love it. The soundtrack ratchets up the intensity of the action sequences, and the practical effects are breathtaking. Now, revisiting Fury Road after watching Furiosa enhances the experience of these two pieces, with moments in Fury Road hitting even harder after seeing firsthand the devastating losses that plague Furiosa in this prequel. It's a huge shame to see something as bold and as imaginative as Furiosa struggle at the box office. Miller had actually planned a third film in his reimagined Mad Max saga called The Wasteland, which is another prequel to Fury Road that would explore Max's backstory. But the likelihood of this ever getting greenlit is not looking favourable. I would love to see another Mad Max entry whilst Miller still has the energy to put such stunning storytelling on the big screen. But in the meantime, I'll be happy to keep revisiting Furiosa. Listeners might know that I don't like rewatching films. It just seems like a waste of time to me. There's so many films I've not yet seen, why am I rewatching stuff I've already seen? But I have to confess, I've already seen Furiosa 3 times since it came out last year, and I could happily watch it again right now. This is one of the greatest achievements in modern cinema, and I feel absolutely blessed to live in a world where such epic storytelling sees the light of day.
I also preferred this over Fury Road. I did see a comment somewhere that kind of summarized it the best. Fury Road is more like a video game, whereas this is like a Dungeons and Dragons style tabletop RPG, because it has the dreaded words, according to Soul, amazing world building. And because of its world building, I find that it kind of made the few action sequences more effective, especially that big one. And the 2 performances really shined, in my opinion. Anya Taylor-Joy just spoke 1,000 words through the use of her eyes, and Chris Hemsworth is on the other end of the spectrum, giving one of the most silly and over-the-top hammy villain performances. And I really enjoyed the contrast between each other.
I loved Furiosa as well. I mean, it's not quite my top 10 or even top 20. It's just below there. Again, it's been an amazing year, but I couldn't agree more in terms of just the epic nature of this film, or just how amazing and memorable Chris Hemsworth is. He really is one of the most memorable, like you said, like pantomime villain, but in the most charming way. Like he's a full-on evil psychopath that still has that kind of charm that you just want to watch him. You love watching him be evil and doing terrible things. It's just fantastic to see, and he fits so well into this world, which has always been so over the top. I think that the comparisons you made, Arthur, are pretty good. I mean, I thought Mad Max Fury Road was great as well, though I will give this a slight tip. Like Mad Max Fury Road was so special in that it really was just like all-out action. It's one plot line. You drive somewhere, you drive back. That's it. That's that simple. Meanwhile, there's all of the world building, 2 big eras, and just so much great backstory. It really makes the world feel alive. It's a world where the silly fits, and that's awesome to see, because it's great to just have fun and have a fun action film again. I mean, it has some things that Dune doesn't have, right? Like Dune is very self-serious. It's done in, like I mentioned, like in the same kind of, let's take the fantastical and make it serious, like Nolan did with Dark Knight. But meanwhile, Furiosa is more in the era of like Tim Burton's Batman, you know, just with a Mad Max spin. It is that colorful. It is that bigger than life. One thing that really put a slight damper on the film for me is like the very, very ending, when the plot is all done, and then like you have like this 2 minutes or so just kind of setting up Fury Road, like quickly just speeding through like the events that led to just the very beginning of Fury Road and starting it to kind of connect the movies. I don't think that was needed. I think that took us out of just the self-contained story this film was. We know that's what happens next anyways. We don't need to see it. But yeah, like a really great film, and like for just fantastic action. I'm so disappointed it didn't make more, because Dune 2 blew up, this didn't, and I do agree with you, Tom. This is better than Dune 2. So yeah, it's a shame that we're not getting a third one here.
Yeah, I have absolutely no interest in seeing Furiosa, and what everybody has said so far on the podcast makes me think it's really not going to be for me. It's not really the sort of science fiction that I like. I've seen the other 4 Mad Max films, and while Fury Road is probably my favourite of them, the first 2 really didn't do anything for me. I'm not into post-apocalyptic, and for me it was just too much of that over the top. The third one I think is kind of underappreciated, but mainly I guess for the Tina Turner song. The fourth one I guess was a bit different, but yeah, I just couldn't bring myself to watch this, and I actually wrote in the comments there that I wish that George Miller did 5 Witches of Eastwick films instead, because the Witches of Eastwick I've seen, I think, more times than Tom has seen Furiosa. I think that's just a really, really cool, funny, great comedy, and I guess that's where I sort of see George Miller's strength as a filmmaker, rather than all this post-apocalyptic stuff that he always gets acclaimed for. But you know, look, when push comes to shove, I do have more interest in Furiosa than Dune, so I'll probably end up seeing that one sooner than I would end up seeing Dune Part 1, Part 2, or that dreaded Part 3.
You're missing out, Sol. It's the year of desert sci-fi and you're just missing it all. It's disappointing. One day you'll have a change of heart and you'll realise that you do actually like post-apocalyptic cinema and you'll absolutely love Furiosa. It's going to happen.
Sol is not saying a word, so I think that's answer enough for you. And it looks like we're going to be ending the episode in a completely different pace than Furiosa and Dune 2. Or even Cinnamon Story, because my favorite film of the year is Payal Kapadia's All We Imagine as Light. It's just one of the most beautiful films of the decade. The first half almost feels like a city symphony with days disappearing into each other and just these strong arcs of women living in very limited life and just being captured with mesmerizing melancholy. It's not quite as beautiful as In the Mood for Love, but the sense of this poetic longing makes me feel like these two films are connected in more ways than one. It also really reminded me of a lot of Chantal Akerman's very best work, like The Meeting Savannah, A Whole Night, or even in some parts, News from Home, with some pillow shots having the same kind of power as her films, or even Ghibli to a point. Like, it just has that kind of pace where it just sets you into the story and the world. The film follows 3 Hindu women working in a hospital in Bombay, all at different points in their lives with different relationships with men. We have the young nurse in love with a Muslim boy, and just this clear sense of mischief, of sneaking around against their family's approval, if they were ever found out. Then you have a somewhat older nurse who's married, but to a husband from an arranged marriage who she has barely seen. She just has no connection to this man who's been working abroad for their entire marriage, and she hasn't even heard from him for a year, but still she has to live her life as his wife, even with romantic possibilities around her. And then finally we have an older widow who's working more in a service role in the hospital and is about to be evicted. And just throughout this first act, we follow these characters face the problems. We just get lost in the rhythm of the city. And if the entire film was like that, it would probably enter like the top pantheon of my all-time favorite films. And it still might. It's close to being that. But I've still yet to fully come to terms with the second act, because it's just such a shock to the senses. It changes everything. It slows everything down. It's very bold. It's very, very unusual what it's doing. Essentially, you have our 3 leads traveling back to the village since the widow is about to be evicted, and like helping her set up her new life. The pace just changes. Like in the first act, I can't tell how many days, weeks, or maybe even months passed. But in the second act, it all takes place in about a day, and you feel time in a much more slow way. I think my interpretation of it all is essentially like you can get lost in the city, but as life slows down, you can actually start to assess your situation. And there's a very unusual and again bold moment of what could be interpreted to be magical realism as well. Perhaps like a little tie to bird. That can be seen as very powerful, but I know some people didn't fully love. But just this whole film as a package is just so powerful and beautiful. I'm not from India, so I might lose some cultural references there, but the themes of just this force of having to fit into society and going along with tradition and what's expected of you, it can still be universally understood. And for me, it's just one of the most powerful and beautiful films of the year and of the decade, honestly.
It's not on my best of list, but it's something I really enjoyed as well. Like you said, it was the city symphony part that was easily my favorite. I also liked it when the camera was like, slightly shaking. It was fitting of the city because of its incredibly hustling and bustling atmosphere to it. And I enjoyed how all the plots are hyperlinked in a way, as they all connect to the city itself, like with the stories you said, the 2 people sneaking around in various places, the one not having the connection because there's someone not in the city, and then like the development of the city itself. But because of that, I kind of felt underwhelmed of how it played out later on, and I wish it was just that symphony aspect. But still, with this and my horror honorable mention, I think it's time for cinephiles to like look into more Indian films, specifically Malayalam films, because it seems like they're doing a great wave of stuff right now.
All You Imagine Is Light is a film that I went into it knowing that it had been heavily praised for its visuals, and I can agree with that. The way that she captures the thriving city at night is utterly gorgeous, with sharp blues, bright white lights, and cutaways to teenagers playing soccer by lamppost lights. There's also, for me, there's a really engaging subplot in which the main nurse character tries to help a colleague hang onto her apartment despite not having the necessary paperwork, while a greedy developer attempts to push her out. And the problem for me is that I felt that that's what the film should be about like sort of gentrification and the redevelopment of a city that was already beautiful in the first place. That, for me, is the strength of the film. But rather than that, the majority of the movie is about the nurse and her roommate balancing love interests in their lives, which just for me is nowhere near as interesting. I mean, she is in a bit of a bind because her husband abandoned her, but I didn't really feel there were any real stakes in the lingering question of will she or won't she take on another lover. Certainly nothing by comparison to her colleague being shafted out of her home. And there was also a lot of her being bored at work, which I found really hard to relate to, given how pushed to breaking point the medical system is over here, with nurses barely having a chance for a full lunch break, let alone swing around on a wheelie chair for minutes on end. So, I don't know, the film clearly hit the right note with a large number of filmgoers. It's got a really strong reputation. But for me, I just wish the story was about something as important and, I guess, enticing as this colleague being forced out of her apartment so gentrification can take place. I wish it was about something as topical as that, rather than just about bored nurses and love and whatever. So as a narrative, the film was a fail for me, even though it passed with flying colours as a visual experience.
I knew that this film had a lot of critical acclaim, so perhaps my expectations were a bit too high, but I was hugely disappointed. To me, it just seems like a run-of-the-mill art house hype movie. Does not deserve the acclaim. The visuals are okay, but I need a compelling story to go with them, or I'm just bored. I couldn't get invested in any of the characters, the story didn't seem to go anywhere, and I just felt utter disappointment. I feel bad because I know it's a film that's close to Chris's heart, but yeah, this just didn't work for me, unfortunately.
I mean, that's okay, Tom. I mean, since I didn't have a Radu the film on my list this year, I had to find a replacement to kind of have this anticlimax at the end with you and me.
Yeah.
It always happens every year with my number one. I think maybe I should just warn you about my number one every year. I'm not sure, like, even though there's a big overlap between our lists, like that one film that tends to squeeze in as my number one tends to have something that puts you off. Let's see what I do next year. One of these days I'm gonna find something on top that we all agree on. But that's it, guys. That's our top 10s. Let us know which one of us you're closest to. Let us know what your favorite films of the year are as well. Did we miss any? Did we malign any? Like, are you frustrated that Anura didn't make it all the way to our top 5s, even though it's on 3 of our top 10 lists? Let us know. We will have a dedicated thread up for this episode on icmforum.com, so just go there and join us in the debate. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and join us again soon.
You have been listening to Talking Images, the official podcast of icmforum.com.